We need to find some, what did Dan call him? Triple X temptation?
Who knew that? But yeah, they're saying that like apparently the call was from someone who knew them, or at least the CPS agents that ended up showing up said that. I think it's very bizarre for him to try and blame me, even remotely. I know he's tried to blame me and like Trisha Paytas for this as well, which is very bizarre because I've never mentioned CPS once. I'm pretty like strongly against CPS because it's so underfunded and there aren't enough homes for people. I've never said.
God, I hate the bog standard, like, thoughtless progressive positions. These brain dead bimbo just have as they, whatever. Like, I'm against CPS because it's underfunded. What the does that mean? Should you be able to just, like, kids because CPS is underfunded? Like, what does that comment mean? I'm against it because it's underfunded. Like, what a thoughtless comment.
Enough homes for people. I've never said to do this. Strongly against CPS because it's so underfunded and there aren't enough homes for people. I've never said to do this. I in fact say the complete opposite, which is like, don't tap the glass. Don't waste your time going and responding or commenting or even doing any of this shit. Enjoy yourself in this stream. We can all point and laugh at the guy who looks like an insane person, and then we can go on about our lives. It's a waste of your time. If you want to go bother someone, if you want to call and get something done, call your local representative. Call your local politicians. They're literally public servants. They are there to listen to you complain to them. They're there to listen to you say, I hate everything that you do. You suck at your job. Why the fuck are you in support of these bills? Why the fuck aren't you in support of these ones? That's what they're there for. So if you're going to spend your time being a hater, you should do it to your local politicians. And again, I've always said that. You can look back like years at this point. That's the only type of action that I've ever told people to engage in. Mostly, again, because I think it's a waste of your guys' time. Like going and leaving a hate comment or whatever, or giving a fuck about what this guy does. In fact, this is why people are very uncharitable in general. It's because when you are charitable, nobody notices. I've said multiple times, I'm not going to ever comment on whether or not I think that this guy, Ethan Klein, is a good father or like his relationship with his family.
God, there's so much harm I wish on her and the rest of these people. If you don't know how the ecosystem works, the frustrating thing is that these people will all knowingly play into. It happens to me all the time. I'm used to it, everybody. Ethan's probably not. You have these communities that are like genuinely fucking unhinged, right? The super anti-fan communities, the snarkers, the farmers, whatever. You have these communities that will be genuinely unhinged. But then you'll get like a content creator, and they'll bring content from these communities. Okay? These people will all watch them. Like, they talk about their streams and stuff. You can go to the subreddits, you can go to the forums, whatever. You can see it constantly. And then, knowing that they have these unhinged, deranged, probably unwashed, possibly mentally disabled, probably state-funded or still living with their parents at the age of 35, fat fucking losers. These guys are their strongest warriors who will do all of the doxing, A-logging, whatever else, CPS calling. And then this person would just be like, I don't know why, because these guys' faces aren't as public, because they're just like random forum posters. These people will stand with all the support of these people. Like, I don't know why Ethan or anyone else, I don't know why. Why are they so mad? I haven't done anything bad at all. Meanwhile, okay, these social rejects, if they get a single DM from anybody on Twitter, 0 follower account, okay, right? I'm talking about your dipshits like Ludwig or any of these guys. They get a single DM saying, oh, kill yourself. They're like, I've gotten so much harassment from that community. Wow, the whole community is harassing me so much. And it'll always be like a 0 follower person on a platform that you have no control of. You can't ban it or do anything. But like, they'll just sit here and like smile innocently. And say like, I don't know why they're so mad at me. I have no idea. Meanwhile, like if all these different anti-fan, like doxing, A-logging, swatting, CPS calling, crazy communities are working with them. It's just so gross. I hate this dynamic. This is why whenever streamers say shit like smaller streamers, like, I don't believe that they're bullying me. It's so unfair. I'm a smaller streamer. Fuck that. They deserve, Denims deserves every single thing that anybody would ever say about her online. 1 billion%. And a billion times more. Okay? Fuck these people. Jesus.
What I will say is it's very loser behavior to have a wife and kids and spend all your time in the editing dungeon.
Like, see, she's doing it. She's playing right into like all of the types of comments that they make, and she's doing it. And she signals them, and they know, and they are. Oh, it's like the wink, 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 wink. Like, you're some single fucking loser who's going to hit the wall harder than fucking Lav has. Okay, like, you have no friends in real life. You have no life. You don't even really have a streaming career. You're literally. I don't even like to say Hassan Orbiter because Hassan doesn't even let you on his fucking stream, right? Like, the guy that you try to leech all of your clout off of doesn't even like you or talk to you. Like, it's just the grossest type of human being in the world. It's the grossest type of human being in the world.
That's just pathetic. That's a comment on you being a pathetic loser. That you would rather spend your time editing a video that is in unbelievably poor taste, is just not well researched, just very pathetic overall.
Zero substantive responses to anything. Zero responses to anything said, by the way, in Ethan's video. But
Instead of spending time with your fucking family and being like, actually, I don't give a fuck about this drama.
like, you know it's his job, you stupid bitch, right? You know that, right? I'm sorry. Of course she knows that. It's all part of the game. This is part of the game, right? I can't believe that you would make videos about people on the internet, you fucking loser. Like, whoa, what do you think you are? Some kind of YouTuber?
That's just you being a loser. That's just you being an internet degen loser. And if anything, honestly, with the way that this guy simps for his wife, I believe that he's a great dad. I believe that his kids ask him for whatever he wants or whatever they want, and he just gives it to them. Have you seen how hard this guy fucking just gives Hila whatever she wants?
Oh, and she's picked up on the anti-Semitic Jewish mind control trope too. Some of the anti-fan communities are now saying the reason why Ethan simps so hard for Israel is because Hila's the one pulling the strings behind the scenes because she's Israeli or whatever. So nice. Good signaling there. Now all we need is for her to claim that Ethan is a sexist racist and we've got the whole trifecta. Can we do it in 20 seconds or 16 seconds? Let's go.
He literally doesn't fight her on anything. This guy's probably a great dad. He probably cares the most about his kids and his wife above all else.
Including the lives of minorities.
Hope everyone is having a lovely day.
Fuck, we didn't get there. I'm sorry. Jesus Christ. Oh, we have more.
1, because like Arab. 2, because woman. 3.
Yeah. I had to pre-watch. I pre-watched all of these. I did. What do you want me to say? I'm a pre-watcher. I am.
About me in general. 1, because like Arab. 2, because woman. 3, because I won't just fold. Because he's trying to bully me. I'm not going to just fold and be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm never going to say anything mean again. Sorry.
Who's asking you to never? No one cares if you guys say anything mean. It's just when you're unhinged about like people's like, families and shit. That's crazy. That's wild.
Be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm never going to say anything mean again. Sorry. I'm sorry. I don't play that game. And I think it's pissed him off enough that he's now trying to connect me to the CPS thing, even though I was gone. I didn't stream for 3 days when this happened. And the stream prior to that, I didn't make any comments about CPS.
But she did make comments about the children disease or whatever. She not like it's just all this is all like performative bullshit. And the Hassan fans in the chat are slurping it up. How long has Denims occupied the far left space and shifted to support Hassan? Was she always like this? No, back when she was leeching off of me, no, she wasn't like this at all. But these people are like shapeshifters. They take on the form of whatever whatever lake you throw them in. They're like a sponge and they absorb it and they become whatever I guess they're trying to suck up to. But she's been a Hassan parasite for probably, like 3 or 4 years now?
Like I have nothing to do with this. I think you're just trying to pin this on the people you don't like because you can, which is very bizarre, very insane stuff. And I think I'll play the clip. I'll play the clip about me in general. Create any bad memory for them. You're not forming memories at 3 years old, and it's very rare that you're forming memories at 5 years old.
I thought you start forming memories at like 2 or 3. You don't have memories of 5 years old? I mean, not many, but... Yeah, I think for the first 2 years of your life, you generally don't. 5 years old, though? Also, what is this argument? Sir, why are you shaking your baby? Well, I don't shake them hard enough to cause any permanent damage. And I know they can't form memories until they're 5 years old, Your Honor, so we're Gucci. And he's like, fuck. He hit me with the foolproof logic. Fuck.
Nah, yes, you are. No, you're not. When we're talking about being able to remember, being able to recall memories, it's like 4 is the cutoff. But even if you are forming any memories at 4, you're not going to be able to remember them past like 15.
What is she talking about? Oh, she's talking about the post-puberty memory shedding event. That's where when you're like 15, 16, 17, your body just starts to randomly eject all of your preteen memories. I remember this. My bad. I forgot because I'm 36 now. And when you turn 35, you forget everything before you were 22. So I forgot about my forgetting event. My bad, guys. You'll get there. Don't worry.
You have maybe 1 or 2 memories. Yes, you will remember. So everyone in chat here has...
Oh, wait. She's going to say... Hold on. No, she's going to say... So everyone in chat here has every single memory from when they were 4 years old. You remember every single meal. You remember... Maybe not. Hold on. Sorry. I'm just in a hate mode. I'm hating right now.
Collection, like 50 plus memories of...
What am I? I'm a god. I know everything. What do you want me to say? Do you know what it's like to be burdened with the knowledge of every single thing that's ever been said? Do you know what it's like?
When they were 3 years old? Here, we'll look it up.
Actually, your hippocampus only has 3 save slots, so 50 memories would be impossible, idiot.
Let me see if I can find an NCBI study on.
No, she doesn't like what she saw first. She doesn't like the first result. Oh, no.
Let me see if I can find an NCBI study on. I only have a few memories from when I was 2, 3, and 4.
What his fingers smell like.
You think that the reason why this happened is because you're talking about your kids contracting Giardia? Maybe you should stop talking about your children on stream in that way. I hold the parents accountable for that.
God, one of the things I hate that I see her and Mike do, I don't know, there's like a Hassan parasite thing. This bitch she'll say a statement and then she'll look at chat to see how it's received. And then based on how it's received, then she'll go back to whatever she was ranting about before. I hate it when people are subhuman. When they act like this. Oh my God. Am I crazy? I feel like her and Mike do the same thing. They'll like say a comment and then and then they look and they see how their chat's reacting to see if it's like well received or not. And then they come back and they either go harder or they try to like walk back and like just fuck. Yeah, it's like they're doing stand-up comedy for their stream. Hassan does the same sometimes. I'm not just there's a thing. I'm not just talking about like looking at chat. Like everybody looks at chat after you say things or whatever. But Hassan will say things and then he'll look at chat for like a response. But I feel like people like Denims and Mike, I feel like I've seen these two guys do it. They're mediating in real time what they're saying based on like how chat is receiving like half the sentence. I don't know if that makes sense. It's not just like a streamer saying things and it's like, all right, yeah, what's chat doing here? It's like they say something and they wait to see how chat's receiving it and then they kind of like, they go forward from there. It's just so fucking annoying. Oh my God. Maybe Hassan does do it. I just don't watch him enough, but we can up our Hassan hate watching.
You hear about stories people...
God, I will make you watch this again because it's a great bit and it's a shame we don't have it in live streaming.
Gregory Dawson filling in for Clifford Baines, who was away protesting gay marriage. Today, for the first time on In the Know, we are giving viewers a chance at home to agree or disagree with our panelists' comments using the Instapoll tracker on our website. Panelists, you'll see the live results right here in the studio. Let's get started. The dollar has posted incremental gains against both the pound and the euro in recent weeks. Are things looking up for the U.S. economy?
Gregory, it's not that simple. First off, the value of the dollar is not a reliable indicator of our fiscal health, all right? There are a number of factors involved, many of which will not become apparent for years to come. The long and short of it is that things are going to get bad before they get better.
I actually don't think the situation is quite so grim. I think that the economy actually is on the rebound.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I don't believe in this gloom and doom stuff. I think that the future is very bright.
Right.
You know, as long as we all pull up our
I'm sorry,
bootstraps.
just to clarify, I did not mean to say that the economy is in bad shape.
But didn't you just say that you believe it will continue to get worse?
I believe you said that.
Right.
Yeah.
Technically, but what I meant to
You
say,
know, but the real reason that the
semantically,
economy is doing better right now is because the hard-working Americans
Right.
are out there. You know, all of the smart, resilient, hard-working Americans out there.
Good point.
Yes.
Who is going to pay for all these government bailouts?
Yes.
It's our children, our poor children.
See, Terrence, is the average American losing faith in the economy?
Well, Gregory, when you come home, open your post office box and find a huge stack of bills, it's discouraging. It's because bills are such a discouraging thing to find when you open your post office box. And that is not something a person wants to find when they open their post office box.
Yes, in some
true.
ways, the
P.O. box.
economy is
talking about
like
the old
a
PO box,
post
huh?
office box.
I have several
Right.
post office
Because the
boxes.
post
today.
office box
It's a P.O. box.
is
Post office box.
Like a mailbox.
It's
Post
like-
office box.
Duncan, could you tell us some ways that you think the economy is doing badly again?
Well, I was actually discussing the economy with my good friend, the rapper Kanye West, who is a personal friend of mine, and we visit frequently. You know, I think you're taking what I said earlier out of context. What I meant to say was that the economy can only be spurred into
Wow.
This is spell or lunch. Your word is broccoli.
Jesus.
B-R-O-C-I. Oh God! This is
I'm talking to Ryan C. Mullally soon. I think I spoke to him, one of the guys in real life in New York. Oh boy. Oh boy. This is a stupid fucking picture. What's going on with Johnny Somali? Why is she reading a 3-year-old?
I saw this. Ethan, the
post.
dog poops are 100% attracting flies. This is from 3 years ago. As owners of dogs in an apartment, we don't deal with flies because we pick up poop every day from the backyard. Whenever we go a few days without picking up poop is when the flies start to hang out inside the house too. Honestly, hearing him try to say that poop doesn't attract flies was a big bruh moment. I also don't get why his dogs are constantly pooping indoors, but that's another conversation. Didn't his kids get like Giardia from the dog poop around the house? Dude, in what world do you...
I don't even know what the
This is
fuck.
something that like my brain, it breaks my brain. It like literally, it breaks my brain.
What the fuck is Giardia? Like the airport in New York? I don't even know what the fuck this is. What kind of disease is this?
I don't think I am like the neatest person. But I feel like anything that gets worse over time needs to get taken care of immediately.
Isn't that everything?
But Danny Aaron's in the build-up was instrumental. He was. He got away with a strange first touch.
And we've got a reaction
Oh,
from
no.
that goal with Cecil. Is Kai Sanat.
I want to get a reaction to that goal. It's currently
Damn. Who produced this soccer event? Looks kind of cool.
a great finale.
15 odd. But
Sidemen,
forget about
gotcha.
that. Save this one. Speed to win it for YouTube All-Stars.
Make him put it either side. Stand down the middle, XQC.
It's going to be the biggest sue you've ever heard if this goes in.
Here we go.
Speed!
Oh, no! Sorry. Giardia is a microscopic parasite that causes an intestinal infection. Is there a parasite that isn't microscopic? Or I guess like a leech is a parasite, huh? Never mind. Okay. No, you're right. Fuck you. You're lucky. Ban him. Denims, good one. A triple no scope.
Malms with the necessary trade. There is still a Senzu to be found, and actually Blitz chips away over the CT smoke. Window no scope from Senzu. No way! It's a perfect end to.
Jesus.
Bro. Surely he scores. There's no way Sketch saves a penalty from Simon. There's no way.
This is the banker. It's just which corner he's putting it in.
If
If
he
he
does
does
not
not
score.
score,
Simon!
Oh, no!
I can't believe it's not.
No way!
What just happened?
No way!
Sketch, this is what I'm talking about.
With glasses on? What the fuck?
Oh my God!
Dude, he saved. And the YouTube All-Stars can't believe it.
Bro. Surely he scores. There's no way Sketch saves a penalty from Simon. There's no way.
This is the banker. It's just which corner he's putting it in.
If
If
he
he
does
does
not
not
score,
score,
Simon! I can't believe it's not.
Oh no. What how much did this cost? Have they put a report out or anything on it? Or would they talk about that? This is like a crazy high production event. I'm guessing they sold tickets too. These are all They had 2 million live viewers. God damn. What? What? Okay. Jesus. Ah! Wait. Does this guy look like the emote? What's it called? Kappa. Oh, that's him. Johnny Smalley made fun of comfort women statues in Korea. Now he's going to get sentenced in prison in Korea where he will be made in comfort. Wow. That's pretty wild, bro. Good stream today, guys. Pack it in. What have you been eating lately? Just chicken and broccoli and oats every single day and raw eggs when I'm thirsty. Wow, hello, hello.
Yo.
Wow, what's up? Wait, can you hear me? Hello, hello?
Hey, man.
Hi, can you hear me?
Is my audio fucked?
No, I can hear you. I can hear you, but you can't hear me. I don't know how to sign language that. Okay, got him. Oh, fuck me. Bro, this cat just fucked my shit up. Hold on, just a little bit. A little bit of... like 3 fucking marks on me. Oh. You try to disembowel me.
Better?
Well, can you hear me? Hello?
You know? The fuck?
Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Oh, that interesting. Oh, that interesting. I need a second monitor for this stream. Fuck. For my streaming PC. Your honey screaming in the background. Stream looks fucked. No, that's a feature, my friend. You're just too stupid. Your brain is just too small to understand it right now. One day you'll get it. Okay, never mind. I'm 20 for the redrawn. Did you guys say I got found on Twitter? I'm making it to the big leagues. By the one and only Retard Finder account. Hell yeah. Find me, babe.
All right, fuck. Is this working now?
I don't know. Is it? Hello, hello?
I can't hear you at all.
Well, that's a problem. I can just do sign language. I can't do sign language. Check the settings on Discord for the audio output, maybe question mark. Oh my god. Okay. Hello, hello.
Now I can hear you.
Oh, cool.
Okay, but you...
Do you want to turn your camera on?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
All right. So Discord was just super wildly fucked and had to be reset. Awesome. All right, sorry about that.
Let me get your Camera up. Do you want to introduce yourself for those that might not remember you?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ryan Mullally. I'm a former teacher, former Democrat, and current lawyer. And Destiny and I last chatted, God, I guess it was like 2 days before the allegations and that whole circus dropped. So that was sure a welcome to the internet moment for me, let's say. Obviously, I was the least affected of everyone involved, but you can imagine what my
Least
replies looked
affected.
like for the next couple of days.
Least affected so far. Okay. All right. What's up? What do you want to chat about?
Yeah, man. I want to talk about what's going on with the Democrats right now. Like, it seems like what's the strategy? Like, I don't quite get it. Like, I talk to people like Josiah at Pondering Politics or Pisco, or maybe we'll see what Yusuf have to say about it. And there seems to be a sentiment that they want to be like more aggressive, more memey, more, dunking, more, getting out there and mixing it up and trying to play dirty. And I just don't see that this is working. And, I mean, I would love to vote for the Democrats in the next cycle. I used to vote for them. So this would be fantastic. And I just don't understand what they're doing.
I don't know. Well, I think it's a challenge because on the Democratic side, I think Democrats are interested in like actual governance, and I think they're interested in actually trying to like further the country along. But the Republicans have sold themselves out to having absolutely no moral values, absolutely no standard for behavior, and have basically made it as okay as possible to engage in relentless illegal activity. And so it's a very weird world when you're trying to compete with those people in an environment where they've greenlit criminal behavior and lying. Like, it's a very, very difficult environment to.
What do you think it looks like when a Democrat wins? Like to me, the idea that you're going to get into a meme contest or a who's the bigger asshole contest with Donald Trump and have that be a winning strategy seems crazy to me. Like, I think it wouldn't work in general because that's not what the Democratic base responds to. And also, he's like the heavyweight champion of the world in those categories. Like, it's picking a fight you can't win. I think the kind of like the cleverness of the right's own the lib strategy was that it moved the playing field into an area where the left is disadvantaged. I think when people fracture and go into their own ideological camps, the right's base is more homogenous. I think it just benefits them to be in this kind of information environment. So I don't know. I just don't see that being I don't see that move working for the Democrats. But
I mean,
maybe you do.
What move works?
I think when the Democrats win, they present. I'm thinking of like Clinton. I'm thinking of Obama.
Well, don't think about any of those people because that media environment doesn't matter anymore. We're in a totally new world right now. So everything prior to 2016 is totally out the window. 2016 to 2020 started to change things quite a bit, and now we live in a whole new world.
I mean, I think that's true in terms of like the methods, but in terms of the vision, what I mean is that you need to show a vision of somebody wants to make the country better, has a clear common sense plan for doing it. And
neither of those things have mattered to voters for a while. They clearly didn't matter last election.
I think last election, the problem is that nobody believed her.
That's a lie. No. To be clear, that's a total lie, right? It's people are more concerned right now with culture war stuff than anything having to do with any part of like how the system is supposed to work, what the laws are, and how the economy is supposed to work. Mm-hmm. That's just like you included. None of you guys care about any of the actual like governance stuff because if we start to go issue by issue, it's all just going to come down to like wokeism and whatever that means. So the idea
and we can if you want, but I think that's totally false. I think the biggest issue she had.
I'm curious. Okay, wait. Let's try this real quick. So, who do you think was better on freedom of speech?
I think she's like a non-entity. I don't really know. Between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, I think they've both been pretty terrible.
Okay, can you give me one example that you feel like Biden did that was the equivalent to Donald Trump suing CNN because he didn't like the Kamala Harris interview and suing Seltzer, the pollster in Iowa?
No, they're not going to be equivalent. But
No.
I
I need something of like something of a similar magnitude to that.
So what Donald Trump does that's very bad.
No, wait.
for free
I don't care what you're gonna say right now. I want something that Biden did that's a similar magnitude to what Trump is doing right now with those two lawsuits.
Is attempt to create a Homeland Security department that would administer speech on the internet, which was eventually rejected, was a very bad idea. His use of Title IX.
Hold on. So for the first thing, you just gave something he didn't do. So he wasn't able to do that.
No,
so he
but
didn't do that. So who cares? And I want to be able to fly, and I want to be able to breathe in outer space and go Super Saiyan.
Well, Donald Trump's going to lose the lawsuit against Belser. I forgot to say that. It's like it's a clear loser.
It doesn't matter if he's going to lose the lawsuit. He still is doing the lawsuit. So these are things that Donald Trump is doing. You gave me Biden desires that are mediated by the environment. So
and then the other example was Title IX. But
what's the Title IX example?
When the way that they use Title IX to chill discussion of gender issues out on campuses, because basically when you work gender identity into Title IX, then it becomes a protected class in Title IX.
How are they chilling discussions on gender issues?
The concern was that when they update Title IX such that gender identity becomes a protected classification, then harassment using wrong pronouns, that sort of thing, becomes a Title IX issue, which then makes it very hard for students who disagree to have conversations on campus about those topics.
Okay, so I just want to be super clear, just because this is a ridiculous comparison. You think that making it so that Title IX would have made it against the rules on college campuses to harass people on the basis of being trans. You think that that's a similar attack on free speech as the president of the United States suing people in media for doing things he doesn't like?
No, I don't think it's equivalent. That's what I was trying to say at the beginning. I think that
wait. If it's not, hold on, stop. You guys keep doing this. Eject all that. I don't care. I'm looking for something equivalent, or I'm looking for you to say, okay, Donald Trump is worse on this. I don't know why it's so many word games. Like, what did the Biden admin do in 4 years that is as bad as our freedom of speech as what Trump is doing?
This ridiculous demand is exactly the kind of thing that drives me crazy about the modern left. Because what you're going to point out is a million areas where Donald Trump acts like a petulant child, takes actions that are
Stop. Hold on. I'm not going to. This is just. Please stop doing this. Wait, no. Donald Trump is not a petulant child. He is the president of the United States of America who is engaged right now in like the destruction of our constitutional order. I don't know why you guys mince words so much. Well, he's putting us in an awkward situation. He's a petulant child. No. He's a fully grown adult male. He's the president of the United States of America. Yes. Okay.
We agree he's doing things that are bad for freedom of speech. Like, I don't know what the problem there is. Like,
yeah, because I'm just, because I said, if you go issue by issue, it's obvious that people like you or you guys don't care about the issues. And then you said, well, you could go by issue by issue. And now I want to. Let's go issue by issue. So on the First Amendment.
What do you mean by people like me, first of all?
Because you guys will act like you're talking about like how governance is or how the country is ran or these constitutional issues. But at the end of the day, it always just goes back to wokeism. Even the one example you just gave me on the First Amendment had to do with trans people in Title IX. What?
We spoke for like an hour and a half. Do you think I voted for him? Is that where you're coming from?
No, I just don't understand all the false, the equivocation and the false equivalencies. I just don't understand. Like, he's a petulant child. Why the equivocation? He's not a petulant child. He's a dictator. He wants to act like a dictator and he's attacking our freedoms. Or the false equivalency. Him suing people in media is the same as Title IX protections making it so that you can't engage in harassment of people on the basis of their gender identity in colleges? Really?
We can't even discuss it. But the issue that I'm getting at, Destiny, is that when the left oversteps, they do it by creating bureaucracy, by creating structure, by creating regulations. When the right oversteps, and at least when I'm talking about Donald Trump, they do it through what you would describe as like authoritarian, I'm taking this action. I would call it like being a petulant child, like I'm mad at AP, so I'm going to kick him out of the room.
Okay,
like,
in the past, okay, I'm curious. In the past,
those are very different approaches.
In the past, I understand. In the past decade, what are the big oversteps that you're talking about?
In terms of...
Here are some big oversteps that I can think of for government expansion of powers and stuff. The Patriot Act. Those are Republicans, right? Iraq and Afghanistan war, where I don't know if you would call these oversteps or whatever, but these are trillions of dollars of wars, started by Republicans. What are these other huge bureaucratic oversteps or these huge oversteps that are infringing on our freedoms or illegal or whatever? What are we thinking of in the past decade or two?
I think that I think this is actually a very interesting topic, but I think that in my political life, which started about like 2000, both parties have continuously expanded the scope of the president's power. So it's stretched beyond what I think is anything resembling appropriate. Both parties have consistently wanted to do that. And
Okay, I'm
we're
gonna
actually
hold on.
at the
Okay, I'm gonna
moment of,
ask. Okay, I'm gonna ask a specific question.
Sure,
What
go
is
ahead.
as bad as the Patriot Act that the Democrats have done?
As bad, drone strikes under Obama was pretty bad. FISA courts under Obama
Wait.
were pretty
Drone
bad.
strikes? Do you think the United States shouldn't engage in drone strikes?
No, I think that when you have an issue with, for example, like U.S. citizens are going to get hit, or if there are due process issues that are being decided behind closed doors, that's pretty bad.
Okay, here, wait. Let's look at that in particular then. I'm interested. So, if we look at how Obama approached that situation, Obama went to the Office of Legal Counsel. He got an opinion on whether or not he had the authority to do this particular thing. The Office of Legal Counsel says it seems you do have the authority to do this particular thing. Obama did do this drone strike of another person, of a U.S. citizen in another country who is accused of working, I think, with a terrorist organization. He carried out the strike. This has not been deemed unconstitutional or illegal by any criminal court, by the Supreme Court. What's our issue with that particular action, and how does that compare to? I don't know if you want to go to the last 6 weeks of Trump, or we can look at like the Eric Adams thing. I would compare it to that easily.
Yeah, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to show up and like defend everything Trump does. So like the Eric Adams thing struck me as super problematic.
What? Listen to what you just said. Wait, super problematic. You sound like a leftist, right? Super problematic.
No.
It was an egregious destruction of the rule of law. It was a quid pro quo offered by our Department of Justice that resulted in the firing or resignation of like 10 different attorneys.
You want to pick my adjectives for me? Is that the extent of our disagreement?
I think the adjectives are fairly important, right?
Like we agree it's a bad thing, and you just want me to use like stronger language, I guess.
Well, the magnitude is important, right? Because we're talking about what are the worst things that have been done. So I think magnitude, yeah, I think it does matter here for sure.
So the point that I was getting at is that what we have now, I think, is a legitimate constitutional inflection point, which is the right wants to have a very powerful president who has total control or almost total control over his agencies. The left also wants to have a very powerful executive branch. They just don't want the president to have that level of control over the agencies. They want the bureaucratic process.
Can you give me an example of how the left does this?
You can't pendulum swing between those two.
Hold on, okay, you're a smart guy. You know a lot of stuff. Yeah. I don't need the vague general statements. What is an example? What do you mean by the left is trying to expand the executive power of the president? What do you mean by that? Give me examples. What are we talking about?
But what has happened consistently over, like, I guess we're talking about like since 2000.
No, just invite it. Give me like example. I don't want vague things. Just example. Because I can think of one example, for instance, of a massive constraining of power under the executive, which was Loper, right? That was a big taking of power away from the executive. That happened in the Supreme Court under Biden. So what is? I'm just curious. What are these examples of the massive stretching of power?
I don't think. Are we attributing Supreme Court decisions to the administration that's in power when they happen?
I mean, I'm just trying to think of like how is the power expanded versus contracted? Like what are we talking about? Like what did Biden do to expand the executive power?
What happens is if you delegate Congress's power to administrative agencies, right? You are expanding the executive power because you're giving the executive agencies the power to issue regulations, to enforce, depending on what the agency's empowered to do. So the more you delegate from Congress to the agencies,
I understand. You're just describing a process. I'm asking for an example of this. What did they do? What was exceptional under Democrats where executive power was expanded? You're just describing how laws are made and how they're implemented through regulation. Like I'm asking for examples. What is this example that was so abhorrent under Democrats?
Well, I think what I'm talking about is like stuff like EPA, Title IX. Let's see that was Department of Education.
Wasn't the EPA? Wasn't the EPA Nixon?
No, what we're talking about is like the scope of the authority. What can you do with the authority? Like, for example, what was the case that went to the Supreme Court where the EPA was trying to regulate underground water as lakes?
Okay.
Like the question is, is that the position you're going to take? Do you want the executive branch to be constantly expanding and to be constantly grabbing more things it has power over? Whereas the conservative vision if you're doing the intellectually defensible version, I'm not sure that's what Trump is doing, by the way, but if it is, then you would have a very powerful executive, but you would need to limit the scope of his authority. You need to prune back executive offices.
Yeah, but let's just go with that one example you just brought up about underwater lakes. So what is your issue here with this? Like, what do you think of the arguments on both sides here? Can you fairly present this as what this argument is? Assuming this is real, I understand conceptually what it is. I haven't seen the actual particular thing, but I can guess what the arguments on both sides are.
It's not an area of like deep expertise for me either. The issue is more, the issue there is, and this is the Chevron deference issue, to what extent is an administrative agency empowered to interpret its own law?
Yeah, okay, which is fair, right? Which I think that's fair. And if Congress is passing laws with Chevron deference in mind, Congress might pass a law saying the executive can manage all the lakes. And whether or not an underground lake counts as a lake or not, that might be a legitimate question. And what's wrong with the executive thinks they have this interpretation, and then, the Supreme Court disagrees, I guess. If Congress disagrees, because it's legislation, that Congress can just amend the law, right? To be real quick, we saw an example of this where the executive was going to ban, I think, funding for all schools that taught archery courses because Congress passed a law that said that you can no longer fund schools that train people to use weapons. And of course, all the politicians came out and they were like, we can't believe that the executive was overstepping, like this is horrible. And the Department of Education was just like, hey, this is how the law is written. And so people had their grievances and they said their dumb shit. But at the end of the day, you know what Congress did? They passed an amendment and they said, we're going to exempt cooking classes and archery classes. And I was like, okay, cool. Then it works. That's it. Like if the executive is interpreting a law from Congress in a way Congress doesn't like, then Congress can just amend the law. It's super easy.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And part of the problem, I think, like to me, like on a meta level, the real crisis that we're in right now is that Congress has been more or less dysfunctional for a long time. And that's why you've seen the executive.
But we passed more major legislation under Biden than in how many different administrations? How is that a dysfunctional Congress? CHIPS Act, Infrastructure Act, the Infrastructure Reinvestment, or the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah. This is my issue. Here's my main issue. I'm trying to communicate it to a human being. Okay, give me a human being take. This is my issue. When I hear people argue in either defense of Trump or not in defense of Trump, but in how much more horrible Kamala would have been, and then I'm like, okay, what are some examples? What are we talking about? I get people that just start talking about like, well, this is what a thing is or whatever, but there's like never any examples. And I can run down, we can go through 10 examples right now if you want of things that in my mind, singular things that this in and of itself makes him a worse candidate to any reasonable American in my mind than Kamala would have been, right? But then it's like, well, what are the bad things? And it's like, I don't know. It's just like all this vague stuff. And it's like, what are we talking about? Like, what are the examples? What are we actually talking about?
Well, I think the problem with Harris, at least from my perspective, was, do I think she was going to rein back, or grow the administrative state? I thought she was going to grow it. Do I think she's going to appoint an originalist to the court if given the opportunity? No, I don't think so. Do I trust her walk back of her kind of like more extreme positions or wokey positions that she took previously? No, not really. I don't think she has principles. I think she's malleable in that way. Do I think that she's going to be
wait.
Like,
give me sure. Let's
strong
do
on Israel, strong in favor of Israel? No, not really.
Do I think she's better on Ukraine?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, give me your top three, like the top three things you think are horrible for Kamala. Of all things, just like the strongest three arguments you think.
I think I just gave you a bunch of stuff that was to me disqualifying for her.
Yeah, but I don't want to go on one. You're like, well, I don't care that much about this. Give me your top three. You're like, these are the three strongest things that I think Kamala would have. These are the three biggest reasons why I wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris.
I think she would grow the administrative state. I think she would appoint non-originalist judges, potentially court pack, potentially break the filibuster. I think she would have been insufficiently supportive of Israel. I think, let's see.
Okay.
Roll back.
Okay.
Keep going.
So when we say grow the administrative state, do we just mean like have a new department created, or what in particular? How would she have grown the administrative state? What do we think?
The administrative state has been in a constant state of growth, I think, at least since 1994. I think like with Bill Clinton was the last time anyone was at all serious about trimming back the size of the federal government.
Okay, so I've heard this before. When we say it's grown, so like the number of federal employees has been about the same for like 50 years. In terms of funding has grown, sure. But I mean like the number of people being managed has also grown. So that's like true, right? Like
Do you have a source for that? I've never heard someone make that claim before. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just don't.
Yeah,
know. I've never seen that claim made before.
Oh wait, I'm so sorry. Hold on, I linked you a random fucking tweet. My copy paste is not working. Hold on. Here, this is just from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. There you go. I know
sorry, that literally is a random tweet. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what that Adrian thing was, but here's the okay.
Okay. Oh, so.
Well, then
for
let
example,
me. Can I ask a concept?
I was asked about this recently with like, are you like enamored with the way Doge is going about things? And my answer was no, but it's also the only game in town. Like I really want the federal government to be pruned back.
Wait. Hold on.
So I think this is going well. No, I don't. But it's the only game in town.
What do you mean it's the only game in town?
Well, the choice there was, do you want, at the time Ramaswamy was involved, which would have been better, but do you want Trump, Vivek, and Musk to attempt to control the size of the federal government, or do you want people who will do, at best, nothing about it, or at more likely grow it? So, like, I do actually think that if Democrats were at all interested in this issue, they might actually be more capable of accomplishing these goals. They're just not interested in at all. So
okay, let me provide it. Hold on, wait. Let me give it.
I might fuck it up versus the side that's not even going to bother.
Let me give a counter to this. Okay, if you want to shrink, not you personally, if somebody wants to shrink government spending, okay, what you have to do is you have to be brave. And you have to take a look at your government programs, and you have to make the argument to the American people, or at least to Congress, and say, hey, here are some programs that we have. I understand that they give us maybe these benefits, but I want to reduce spending. Maybe I'll give it back to the American taxpayers in the form of tax cuts, or maybe at least it'll be a reduction in our deficit. That's how you do a real spending cut. Having an illegal organization like Doge come through with a hatchet and just start arbitrarily slashing at government programs that we don't like for some reason without any idea of what's even being cut, that is not an honorable, dignified, or legal way or effective way to actually curb government spending. And that's not the only player in town. That doesn't make any sense. It would be like a guy running through a hospital where a bunch of kids are dying of cancer with an AK-47 and just shooting children, saying the radiation wasn't working, so I thought I'd try this instead. Doge is not a real department even, and they don't have the authority to make the cuts that they're trying to make, and they're lying about making significant cuts to the federal government by saying it's waste, fraud, and abuse, when it's not. It's just shuttering programs they don't like. That's not a real way to close programs.
I see my plea to tone down the rhetoric really worked.
Wait, hold on. I want to focus. What one thing did I just say that you think was not correct?
You think they're shooting kids in hospitals is an apt metaphor?
Well, okay. My metaphor might have been a metaphor, although they are cutting funding for things like cancer research and stuff. But every single factual.
I made a point about rhetoric, not a point about accuracy.
Okay.
I opened the show by saying I kind of think Democrats are missing the playing field by trying to get into a meme contest with Donald Trump, and that was kind of a meme contesty type response.
I'm not trying to get into a meme. I could never win. I could never be as brave as the man who wants to go to war with China and is doing so by creating enemies of every country in North America and all of Europe at the same time. Okay, I know I would never win a meme war against him because I'm not fucking suicidal. So I understand that.
This is right. I think that I think there are points that you have that are like sound, and they should be heard. And I think the audience for these points are people like me who, I didn't vote for Trump, but I am part of the 20 million who didn't vote for Harris, even though I voted for Democrats my entire life, because there was a serious problem there. And if that's not acknowledged, and the party is starting to acknowledge it, you're starting to see people like Newsom and Buttigieg who are starting to try to navigate these waters, but I don't know that they're the right people to do it. But
Sure, I understand, and I agree with you.
They're going to get killed.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. But I'll go back to what I said at the very beginning, that the issues don't actually matter. And I feel like so far in this conversation, we've seen that. You haven't disagreed with me on a single point that I've brought up. I don't think you've been able to provide any strong examples for any of the points that you're bringing up. So it's a matter of just messaging. None of this, at the end of the day, governance doesn't matter. Legality doesn't matter. Policy doesn't matter. Legislation doesn't matter. It's just a matter of winning the meme wars, basically.
I think what's happening is that you're missing the forest for the trees in this conversation, basically. The problem right now is that people on the left, for whatever reason, have gotten backed into a corner where they are either they can't, they won't, or they can't with authenticity project an actual plan for governance, actual priorities.
But they did. Hold on. Can you admit that the 4 years of governance under Biden, in terms of like policy advancement and everything, was infinitely superior to the 4 years prior of Trump?
No.
Okay, give me one example of how that's not true.
The OSHA COVID thing was, I almost quit my job and joined like a litigation impact group because I was like, that's so flagrantly unconstitutional and problematic that I would need to do something about that.
Wait, that didn't even go through though. It was challenged in the Supreme Court and shot down.
It was absolutely shot down because it was wildly unconstitutional.
Do you see the issue? So then do you see the issue that we have? I can never win an argument because you're not in reality, right? I asked you for an example of how the Biden administration governed worse than Trump, and you gave me an example of something that didn't happen. Literally, that's what just happened.
That was their administration. Their administration said the Office of Health and Safety Administration has the power to cram down a health decision on 80+ million American workers because of health and safety. If they can do that, they can do almost anything. They could do almost anything if they were allowed to do that.
But they weren't. The Supreme Court stopped them, and then they didn't do it.
Yeah. And the Supreme Court is going to stop Donald Trump from doing a bunch of bad stuff too. You're asking me how did they govern? That's how Biden governed.
Okay.
He would have done it. He was stopped. That's who he was. And thank God he was stopped because it was a flagrant violation of the Constitution.
Can you give me an example of something he actually did or something that actually happened?
You don't, why in your mind does it not count if the president does something egregious and unconstitutional and then thank God gets stopped? Why doesn't that reflect on him?
Because even treating this similarly is a bad faith argument. I think that you can make an argument that workers have a vested interest in being healthy and safe at their jobs. OSHA regulates a whole bunch of other behavior. I think there's an argument to be made that protecting you from certain diseases could also be part of that. They made that argument, they lost that argument in the Supreme Court, and therefore the regulation didn't end up going through, which is fine. But to pretend like that is the same level of good faith argumentation that Trump takes to the government in any number of things.
You understand that like millions of companies were enacting vaccine policies that you could get fired for not following on the basis of that planned regulation. Like this, it's not like it had no effect. I know this because I worked
on the
at one
basis
of,
of that. Wasn't there something else going on at the time? Maybe they were just worried about their workers getting super sick from COVID.
But they knew that they could enforce a policy that would lead to you getting fired if you didn't comply with it because the government was mandating that policy. So it created cover for companies to do this, which you've seen. I think that played out all over the place.
Hold on. So what is the hold on? So the flip side, you think that if the government hadn't done this suggestion or hadn't tried to do this, you don't think any companies would have had vaccine mandates?
I don't think any. I'm sure there would have been some less.
Well, I don't even know how I can there's like no way that I can even prove this reality that didn't happen then.
Like, I mean, this is a common sense point. There's a legal risk. You impose vaccine mandates, there's a legal risk. When the government says you're allowed to do it, that legal risk is lessened. That's not complicated. It's the same reason why you're seeing companies roll back DEI stuff now, because there was a legal risk to not having DEI policies. Now there's a legal risk to having DEI policies. So companies change the way that they do business based on how the federal government is acting and how the federal government's enforcing.
What was the legal risk? Who got taken to court for not having DEI policies?
The way you get taken to court is that you would get sued for discrimination. You don't have a DEI policy, so you have no defense, and then you lose.
You understand that companies probably for past both of our lifetimes have had like training for they don't call it DEI, but like so that doesn't sound like a new thing at all.
Many of them do call it DEI, but
no, they might. But I'm saying like when we were kids, right? Did you ever? I remember working at McDonald's and they showed us the fucking stupid videos on the VHS and they put it in and it's about workplace harassment and don't be racist and blah blah blah. I saw the same fucking videos when I worked at a casino too. Yeah, so these things have always existed, but that's like standard practice, and that's not new with DEI. That's nothing to do with Biden or the Democrats. That's like standard practice for everybody.
I think you're making the common sense point, which is not disagreeing with you at all, which is that companies don't do those things because they're like saintly or wonderful, or even necessarily because they care about racial equity. They do them because they don't want to get sued. And if they do get sued, they want to have a clear track record that we have told people not to do this. So if they are doing it, it's not our fault.
Correct.
That's what that's
so that has
for.
nothing to do with DEI.
No, of course it does. So when the federal government is saying we are going to enforce these things, we have a priority, we have policies.
The federal government has always been enforcing workplace discrimination. This is not a new thing. DEI has nothing to do with this. This is all like whether you have a DEI program or some other racial sensitivity training program, whatever the fuck. Like this is not a new thing. This is all the government. The government has always been enforcing this.
So I think we agree on the backdrop of these programs are used as a litigation shield by companies. We can then get into like setting aside whether that's DEI or not. That's what they're used for.
I mean, that's one way to look at it. That's like saying that helmets are used as a shield by construction companies to protect them from litigation if an employee has a brick drop on their head. Would you frame it that way?
I have a pretty cynical view of companies. Yeah, I think that's one of their major concerns.
Okay, but if you're going to frame it that way, then I mean then almost every single company behavior is like this. Is like so reductionist. Like what's the?
Did you see Trump had a recent executive order about law firms? Right, and it had two parts. There's a security clearance part, and there was a DEI part component. Did you see that one?
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things that many
real quick, you would agree that executive order in and of itself was an extremely insane executive order, right?
It has two parts. The first part I don't know very much about.
So the first part is it's literally targeting a law firm because they worked with Hillary Clinton. No, but it's also targeting them probably for investigation as well. This is Donald Trump investigating his political opponents.
On its face, it targeted the security clearances behind, whether or not he's going to investigate them is another topic. But I haven't read the whole thing closely for that question. So
what were they called? It was like Cooey or
it was Perkins Coie was the main law firm.
Okay. Wait, why did you knew the particular law firm? Why did you make this sound more general than it actually was? Because the name of this executive order is literally addressing risk from Perkins Coie LLP.
There's two parts of it. There's the thing that is about Perkins Coie, which is a security clearance issue, which, there's a weird thing that happened in the Trump years, which is that like law firms were doing pro bono work, like to help Jack Smith or to help investigations into Trump. So
wait, what do you mean weird things? You don't think law firms do pro bono work sometimes?
Oh no, I do tons of pro bono work. I understand that, but when you do pro bono work, you're basically saying that this is a cause that the firm finds worthy.
Yes.
To the extent that we're willing to donate our time.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
and if you were a law firm and you felt like there was a president who was attacking fundamental constitutional freedoms in the United States, it makes sense that some people might feel okay, gotcha.
But if that's what your firm's position is, I think that if he gets reelected, it's probably reasonable that you aren't working with this administration. Like that seems pretty straightforward.
But we're not just talking about not working with the administration. We're talking about investigating them for working with political opponents in the past.
Yeah. Now that was the part that the investigations part is the part that I would think is jumping the shark into crazy land. Security clearances seems a little bit different. The part that was interesting to our conversation.
Wait, why would security clearance seem different? What do you mean by that? Why would a government revoke all your security clearances because you happen to work with a political opponent on the last administration?
Well, okay. If you were running a company and you took over and the people who you come in and you're like, okay, who are the lawyers at this company? And they're like, well, we've got a bunch of them. The ones that are really doing a lot of work are the people who work for Pixie, and they're investigating you, and that's what they do. Would you like them to keep working for you, sir? You might say, like, actually, hold on. This seems like these might be lawyers who shouldn't work with the firm while I'm in charge of it. Maybe the next guys are going to come.
Okay, I don't know what your litigation background is, but this sounds exactly like what you would do. Not only is this exactly what you would do, like there's a conflict of interest because at points between me and my opposing parties, we've like literally reached out to the same law firms. If a law firm is really good at what they do, of course you're going to retain them. What do you mean? Now, I probably wouldn't retain the same one as an opponent to me in a lawsuit because that other side might work more on the plaintiff side of things, and my current litigation firms are working more on the defensive side of things. But if I attacked somebody like really brutally and they had a really good defensive law firm, or let's say it is the case that Pixie wins her case against me and sues me for $500 million fucking dollars. Okay, that's fine. Now let's say I want to go and I want to sue somebody else. You better fucking believe I'd probably hire that law firm. They were a really good law firm. They fucked me over super hard. Why would you not? What do you mean?
Because now, would you have the same opinion if they were pro bono? That's the part that gets me, because it's like in my world, it's, you know, like you're right. Lawyers switch sides constantly. There's an understanding, like the guy you sue today might be defending you tomorrow. Like we do that, and we
of course, yeah, and you don't take it personally.
When it's pro bono, it's not business. It is personal at that point.
I mean, it depends.
It
depends on what we're saying. Like, is it business? Is it not business? I mean, like, it depends.
If a law firm was like, man, that Stephen Bunnell is such a goddamn predator. We are going to dedicate our pro bono wing to getting this guy. We're just going to give free legal services to anybody who has a case against him. We are going after that dude.
Sure.
You think that's a law firm you'd want to work with in the future?
If their posture,
get out of here. Get out of here.
If their posture, I mean, like, if it's literally like a personal thing, like that, I find out that Kethels is a partner at this law firm and that's why they're going to, then I'm probably not working it, because now it's beyond personal. But if it's a pro bono thing, or more likely, we'll say some kind of contingency work or whatever, all this is all hypothetical, by the way. It doesn't apply to anything in the real world right now, even if we're using some of the names. But like, if it's a pro bono firm because they feel very strongly about certain types of cases, if I have the same case and it's a good law firm, yeah, you would still work with them. Of course you would. Of course.
That's wild. That's the thing about pro bono work.
Hold on, wait. I just want to be clear, because the normalization and the crazy making on your guys' side is so crazy. You're saying that it would be ordinary to expect that any law firm that did pro bono work for a political opponent should expect for the next 4 years to not be able to do any work that involves a security clearance, any at all, if the enemy makes it into office. That's your position, that it would be totally ordinary that all security clearances will be stripped from everybody working with that law firm, so they can't do any work related to anything in the government where they might need a clearance or anything at all. That would just be an ordinary, normal thing, you think? And also, my next question, and I know you have no answer for this, can you think of a single example of this ever happening in all of U.S. history besides this one event?
I don't think it's ordinary. I don't think it's good. I do think it's reasonable to expect that it would happen. Like that is what happens if he wins the next election. I think that it'd be crazy not
reasonableness. I mean, if we talk about like foreseeability, that's a legal term, right? We talk about like reasonable expectations. If a thing has never happened before, then definitionally, even in court, it wouldn't be considered a reasonable or foreseeable outcome. Why would you think it's reasonable or foreseeable when literally it has never happened before? That's the definition of not reasonable.
When you're in a one-of-one scenario, you're not basing it off of past events. You're basing it off of what you think logically would happen. And I think logically, if you extend pro bono services in a conscious effort to put someone in jail, that person might not want to work with your firm anymore. That's not like
and that
wild.
Person personally.
I've met a human being before. That's where I'm basing that off of.
Yeah, but Trump is the whole government is not just Trump, right? There's a ton of agencies that work with a ton of different firms for a variety of reasons.
He's not the whole government, but he's the biggest piece. You know that.
How many? You just said the federal government is some 2 million employees. If the president doesn't like you, you lose the entire federal government as a client now.
Well, you lose your security clearances, apparently. I mean, I think.
Okay, so let's say that it was the case that let's say during the election cycle, let's say the CEO of Lockheed Martin tweets out, I think Donald Trump is a threat to the Constitution. I don't like these statements that he's made about, the Constitution can be fucking suspended if I'm looking for voter fraud. Do you think then if Trump comes in, he says, hey, Lockheed, no more clearances for your company while I'm in office, would that be acceptable to you?
For that reason, I mean, that's a much smaller thing than the thing we just talked about. And I don't think, by the way, I didn't endorse this. I didn't think this was good. I just said it was understandable. I think that if, for example, if Lockheed Martin was saying like, hey, we're going to donate $100 million to any law firm that can dig up evidence so that we can put Trump in jail, yeah, that probably would affect their ability to work with this administration. And reasonably, that's why they wouldn't do something like that, because it takes on a fuck ton of risk for very little benefit. Like it's when you're donating money and time in a conscious effort to fight somebody, and then it turns out that they win, yeah, you might find yourself in a situation where that affects your business. Like that's why most firms would be cautious about doing something like that.
Would you have said it would be
it's a rough thing
understandable
to
if the
do.
Democrats would have retaliated in any way like this? Or would you be indignant and be screaming from the rooftops at how horrible and disgusting this is? Because I don't know how we can use this excuse of like, it's understandable that Trump would be retaliatory against law firms that he doesn't like and would literally, maybe for the first time in all of U.S. history, author an executive order explicitly calling out a law firm.
No, that same executive order, which is the thing I actually brought it up to talk about, though, was also had a DEI component, which is why I
Yeah, but it's a DEI opponent for this particular law firm.
So I think that's what's going to be interesting about that part, because the security clearance part, as I said at the very beginning, I think it's understandable why that's happening, but I don't like it. The DEI part is interesting because law firms have, at least many, I don't know about Perkins Coie, but many law firms have express racial preferences built into their hiring models.
Okay, but
So
just to be clear, the DEI component of this EO was just about Perkins Coie. This wasn't like a broad thing. Like, he throws in that paragraph of, my administration is committed to ending discrimination under DEI. But like the paragraph before, they're just talking about, all of this is about Perkins Coie. That was literally what the executive order is called, addressing risks from Perkins Coie LLP. This isn't about DEI broadly or anything else. It's just targeting this one law firm because they work with Hillary Clinton.
But this is the reason I brought it up, was this example of earlier you were saying, like, how does it impact companies when the federal government has a stated policy about DEI? If you're living in a world where the federal government is endorsing DEI and is happy about DEI, then you can have programs like many law firms have that are designed specifically to promote hiring on racial or sex grounds or other diversity grounds. If you think the federal government is going to weaponize that against you, you're probably not going to want to have those programs.
But they're not
whether or not your law firm is the one on the top of the executive order.
But they're not
every other law
weaponizing.
firm in the city is reading that shit.
They're not weaponizing DEI against you. They're just saying that if you get sued for discrimination of some sort, one of your defenses might be the fact that you have courses that train on discrimination or whatever, and those might be DEI programs. This is worlds apart from what we're talking about.
I'm not going to name particular firms because it would be inappropriate. But like when I was in law school, the way it works, for example, is you, as a 1L, you normally get a job in academia or something, work for a professor or something like that in that summer. And your second year in that summer, you work for a law firm. And that's probably the law firm that hires you out of law school. That's what, so that there's kind of like a plan for how you spend your summers.
Mm-hmm.
If you were, I'm just using the term broadly, but a DEI friendly candidate, many firms had a first year program that you could join, and you could then work for the firm and get experience at that firm, potentially get hired by that firm and get 2 bites at the apple in terms of summer programs. If you weren't a qualifying candidate, these programs were not open to you. That is, under previous administrations, not a risky thing for a law firm to do because it was kind of in line with federal policy.
What's an example of one of these DEI
Under
programs?
the
What does
current
it mean?
administration, that seems like a risky thing to do.
So you're saying that like a law firm might say, we are looking to hire somebody, but they have to be Hispanic?
I'm saying that they had programs where they would extend summer work as first year only to people who were, minority candidates or otherwise qualified. Meaning, if you're gay, if you have some kind of other status.
I'd be curious, later you can show me, I'm not going to push it on you right now, but I'd be curious if you could show me an example, because I feel like that would just be illegal under Title, wait, what's the discrimination?
I actually think it's more than legal. I think it's probably unconstitutional.
Okay, well, unconstitutional, because that's an opinion. But I'm saying, like, I think it's expressly. I don't know if you can state like hiring preferences in regards to protected classes. I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, and they're law firms, so they're careful about their wording. But the issue is there was no really real litigation risk. Now there is. So I suspect programs like that are probably going to dry up.
Wait, what do you mean there was no
years.
litigation risk?
Because the federal government was in line with that sort of policy. That
wouldn't even matter. When you say litigation risk, these are civil cases that individuals who feel like they are going to sue for harassment over. These aren't federal government cases. It's not like the DOJ is bringing a case here. It would be
you don't think that the federal government's take on what Title IX means matters? You don't think that the way the federal government interprets Title IX impacts the way people can use it or litigate under it?
Not if we're talking about the constitutionality of some of these DEI programs. That would be a civil litigation case that would eventually wind up in front of the Supreme Court. So the federal government has no opinion here. It doesn't matter, right?
I thought you were saying Constitution didn't matter. You just said that. But
well, no, wait. No. I'm just saying that when somebody says, I feel like this is unconstitutional, that's an irrelevant point. But whether or not a program survives constitutionality, the federal government doesn't have, especially if this is a civil case brought by just an ordinary citizen litigant and not the government, right? If a citizen brings a case up for discrimination and it goes up to the Supreme Court, who cares what the federal government's position is on this? It doesn't matter, right? Wait, that's true, right? It wouldn't matter, right?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I followed you.
If I want to sue an employee I want to sue an employer because I feel like they have a DEI program that's unconstitutional, the federal government's position on that doesn't matter. The only thing that would matter is me going through the courts and getting to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court would make that decision. The federal government's position is irrelevant, right?
It would not be irrelevant. It would if you won at the Supreme Court, you obviously won. That's the end of the story. But when you saw like the Harvard litigation, right? Harvard was the defendant, but the Solicitor General was doing most of the arguing at the Supreme Court because the Biden administration was defending the DEI policy at the Supreme Court level. So it makes a tremendous amount of difference whether or not you think the federal government is going to be with or against you when you're doing something like this, especially if you're doing Supreme Court litigation. And even at lower levels, it creates an important distinction in a place like New York in particular, because New York's local human rights law is incredibly protective. It's way stricter than New York state law. It's way stricter than federal law. So if you're trying to avoid liability under that law, you have to be incredibly careful because New York State's so strict. So you would need to feel very comfortable that you have federal arguments that were going to be successful, and knowing that the administration is against you or for you makes a huge difference in that regard. Especially, by the way, when you're taking on enormous risk. Like you're saying like, oh, like I'm taking on the risk of being sued or not sued.
I guess at the end of the day, whether or not an administration wants to put forth their resources, I would have to see how the Solicitor General gets involved there, because I'm trying to think of the path.
If it's helpful, when you apply for certiorari, you have the Solicitor General's office gets notified, and then they can say whether or not they want. Like in every Supreme Court case, the Solicitor General has the option of saying this is important to the U.S. government. We'd like to show up and argue, and it's kind of just a priority given to them.
Sure, that makes sense though, given that like the Supreme Court, Harvard is kind of being sued, but the implication for that case was. I don't remember. I didn't read. Like there were implications around this case that obviously was super concerned what the federal government stance was on like affirmative action and everything. I'll let me amend my language then. I agree that the government having a position on something could influence how likely you are to win or lose the case based on whether or not the federal government wanted to extend the Solicitor General to the Supreme Court arguments for it. So I'll give you like 10% of that. But at the end of the day, the constitutionality of DEI, whether it succeeds or fails, is ultimately going to be up to the Supreme Court, right?
Okay, so the example that I gave is 100% right, but that's 10%. I guess I'll take the 10.
Well, no, wait. I'm saying 10% because you're making it sound like if the federal government thinks that DEI is good or constitutional, then DEI is like always going to succeed, or like that's it. It's just over. But that's not the case, because, for instance, the very thing that we're talking about was a Supreme Court case that the Biden admin lost, that the Biden admin tried to defend with the Solicitor General. They failed, and affirmative action is gone under a Democrat, right?
Yeah, and because because
the federal government supported that.
Doesn't mean that you're going to win.
Sure, but that would be an example, I would say, in my court, right? That was an example of a policy that they didn't like, and somebody challenged it, and the federal government really liked it because Democrats apparently only care about DEI and affirmative action, and they lost, and then it was gone under a Biden administration, under a Democrat admin.
Thank God. The other way that it can influence quite a bit is that a lot of the times you're suing under laws or regulations that are interpreted by the executive branch in different places. Like if you're suing under Title IX, for example, the executive branch has a lot of power to interpret Title IX, and those regulations and interpretations impact what federal law is, even if you're a civil litigant.
Sure, but in that case, blame Congress, right?
No, because those are often delegated to the executive branch.
Wait, delegated by who?
by Congress.
So blame Congress. So they don't have to delegate those. They could amend a law. They could amend a statute. They could pass a new law. They could do things. They could change this anytime they want. If Congress doesn't do it because they're going to pass the
I'm definitely on team trim back the administrative state. So if you're saying what we should do is undelegate.
No, hold on. I'm not talking about trimming back administrative anything. Blah blah blah. Those are empty words. I don't care about trimming or adding to the administrative state. I'm saying that if you don't like,
how's that empty word?
Because some administrative state is good, some administrative is bad. I'm not just going to blanket say I don't like it. But we're not talking about the administrative state being too big or small. What you're expressing frustration with, which by the way, I share in this because Gorsuch's writing was so good on Loper. I fully agree with the decision just because of how good of a writer he is. Okay. But our issue here right now isn't the size of the administrative state. It's how much freedom the executive has to interpret things from Congress. If Congress wants to write something lazily, if Congress wants to write a law saying, I think that the executive branch should be able to kick in the balls everybody who's mean, and then the executive branch gets that law, and they're like, well, fuck, well, who's mean? We're going to interpret it. Your problem there isn't with the executive branch, it's with Congress. They should have delineated very clearly, these are mean people and these aren't mean people. And if they don't, and the executive branch has more statutory authority, I guess, or construction ability to figure it out, then, I mean, that's on Congress, right? They can always pass a new law and change that.
Well, and this is, I think, well in line with what you're saying. One of the things that the Biden administration did was interpret Title IX differently than previous administrations, which changes the way that something like a lawsuit about harassment or any discrimination would function, because Title IX is now different because the Biden administration interpreted that way. I think on the flip side, someone under this administration, and I think there's, by the way, a risk that this administration is going to go way too far and roll back DEI in a way that's like a pendulum swing that's dangerous and terrible.
Sure.
But
just real quick, when you talk about when you talk about interpreting Title IX differently, and I could be totally wrong, but I feel very strongly that I remember this, wasn't adding gender orientation or whatever the fuck trans shit is, wasn't adding that to Title IX, didn't that survive a Supreme Court challenge somewhere that like Kavanaugh authored an opinion on or something? Or am I making this up?
I'm not sure.
Because I thought somebody challenged the gender bullshit going to Title IX being part of that. I thought either Gorsuch or Kavanaugh wrote something on an opinion somewhere that made that survive. It was like, okay, yeah, this is part of Title IX. That's fine.
I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised if you're right. And the reason I wouldn't be surprised is that interpreting Title IX, what we're talking about right now is not so much a question of like legality or constitutionality, but about administrative preference. Like the executive branch has a pretty wide latitude, especially before Loper, to interpret rules and regulations and laws in the administrative context. So
okay,
just
because
like
what's
you,
so
you
bad?
can have a policy, just like a fish thought.
Yeah.
You can have a policy, like if this is the band of discretion, you could probably be anywhere within that band, even if it seems very different, and still be legal.
Sure.
Yeah.
But so I'm just checking. So it seems like this was a Title VII question relating to gender discrimination, and then this encompassed transgender people. That was a 6-3 ruling in 2020 that Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion on. Is this even like a bad thing? Like, is this that extreme? Like, if you can't discriminate against somebody for being gay, probably makes sense you can't discriminate against somebody for being trans, like not in a anti-trans discriminatory way. Like, is that really that much of a stretch? Is this like a...
I mean, obviously I don't know this case well because I just said that I was taking your word for it, so I'm not sure I can comment on that meaningfully. The reason it was relevant is we were talking about whether or not the federal government's view of something like DEI or how to interpret something like DEI would be relevant to a civil litigant, and the answer is yes, because federal government's interpretation of things like Title IX, like various rules and laws in place, would be cited by civil litigants when they were trying to make an argument that there was something discriminatory that happened. So it does matter. It clearly matters. Now that's not saying that I haven't
read too many complaints and everything, but citing the federal government there, I feel like you'd be more likely to cite cases in your complaints and your arguments. I guess you maybe could cite a federal government statement on a thing, but I feel like you're generally citing to cases when you're doing complaints and everything. No.
Well, you cite to both. You cite to cases, you cite to rules, you cite to regulations. You cite to interpretive statements. You'll cite to whatever you think works.
Sure.
That's more of a strategic thing. Like, I mean, certainly, if there's an administrative agency that has a regulation, and they've interpreted that regulation, certainly before Chevron deference was killed, you would cite to that because that their interpretation is essentially binding.
Sure, they're allowed to do that, yeah.
Now it's less useful now than it used to be.
Sure, I guess.
But
so coming back out on this whole section, here, this is my feeling, okay? And again, this is back to my frustrations. So whether or not we feel like transgender discrimination should be included in other things that include sex discrimination or orientation discrimination, I feel like in any reasonable world, there can be a good faith asserted argument for why this is probably a reasonable thing. I would argue almost certainly, but I think maybe reasonable minds could disagree, sure. This is worlds apart from 10 plus actions the Trump admin has taken in like the first month and a half. And this is, and I was asking for like, what are your worst examples of things that have happened? And I feel like this is like a thing. It's like, I mean, I could see it going either way. And I think reasonable minds could disagree here. And I think the argument is good faith and strong on the side of adding trans discrimination as being a not okay thing under these titles. Like, do you think there's like a difference there? Or do you think that it's really like just as bad on one side as it is the other? Or
can we if we're circling all the way back,
sure, go ahead.
Can I reset? Because I think I'm trying to figure out where you're going, and I might have lost you a little bit there. At the beginning, you asked me like, what were the things that made it hard for me to vote for Harris?
Sure, your top three big issues, yeah.
I listed a bunch of things, and I think that I said things about like DEI overreach. I said things about originalism. I said things about breaking the filibuster. I said things. I should have said something about the border. I probably said something about Israel, and no, I wouldn't have said something about Ukraine because I thought she was probably better on Ukraine. So yeah, I think the issue was that I just don't think she was. I don't believe, despite her attempt to pivot center, that she was actually going to do things about these issues. Like, I don't think that was. I had no reason to believe that she would, and I think that if she had been elected, then she would have done essentially whatever the Democratic machine wanted her to do. That was kind of the campaign.
Probably like the same stuff that Biden was doing, right?
Saying something like maybe the last 2 years when I think it seemed like he was more and more president by bureaucracy in the last couple of years than in the first couple of years when he seemed sharper. But I don't have any inside information. That's just my own observations from afar.
Okay, so well then that's an even stronger argument that the Democrat machine was controlling Biden, so the same Democrat machine would have been controlling Kamala, right?
I mean, I think that was how they ran. I think they ran as like, if you think about how the primaries went, if you think about how Bernie got crowded out in 2016, I think they ran as, we are the party that has a strong, centralized vision. And
I don't know. I'm just saying that if Kamala would have been president for 4 years, it would probably be reasonable that it would be probably a continuation of what we saw for the last 4 years.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. And then I feel like no reasonable mind can disagree on the last 4 years would have been better than, at the very least, what we've seen in the last month and a half. But
well, in which ways? I think that you've seen some things that have been.
If you're going to list a bunch of things, one at a time, just one thing at a time, and we can go through each, whatever you want to list right now. Yeah.
The border is much better.
So Donald Trump hasn't passed any legislation related to the border whatsoever.
He never had to pass legislation. It was.
So what has he done to make the border much better?
He is enforcing the existing laws more strictly and making it clear that he's disincentivizing illegal crossings.
So before, the law wasn't being enforced?
Well, the law didn't change between the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, and the current Trump administration. The law has been essentially the same.
Kind of. I mean, Title 42 is a big deal, but...
But what I'm saying is, you could go from the kids in cages era to the Biden era to back again without having major change in the law in that sense, because
the Title 42 is a big deal, right?
Well, a big deal, but I'll grant you that.
Okay.
But a lot of border policy is executive policy. You can do a lot without changing the law, and this has been clearly demonstrated by the fact that the numbers have totally changed. So, and this was the problem, and this is why I thought the attack, where it was clever, but the idea that Trump was somehow obligated to back the bill that the Democrats were trying to pass through, and I think a lot of Republicans joined in to fix the border. It was a good political tactic, but the problem with it is, and the reason it ultimately didn't, I think, ring true for people, is that people knew that you didn't need it to change a lot of this policy. You knew that it was just a question of executive will.
So you think right now, just to be clear, you think that our border issues can be fixed through executive fiat?
I think they have.
And then I'm also reminding you that earlier in the conversation, one of your biggest fears was expansion of executive power. But you think it would be good if the president himself would just try to fix the border through executive action?
I think you're oversimplifying there. I think I think there is a fear of expanding executive authority, but things like border are clearly within the executive's authority.
I super disagree. That is absolutely not true. Immigration acts, Hart-Celler, these are huge acts that pass Congress, not the president. The president has the ability to do emergency border stuff.
I'm not saying it's core and exclusive only to him, but I'm saying like if you think about the things that the executive branch was originally designed to do, like what were its core functions in like, you know, the constitutional era with the founding fathers. Military, borders, international trade would be like the top three. That's what it was for, was to, you know, unify the country and to talk about things where you needed to face internationally with one voice. That was its core function. So yeah, I agree that Congress has a role to play there too, but you know, this is not an area where you're going to trim back executive power, even if you're shrinking the sphere of the executive branch, you'd want to shrink it in other areas. This isn't one of the areas where you shrink it.
Okay, so then I'm just curious. If we go these entire 4 years without any border or immigration bill from Congress, would you consider that a successful Trump presidency on the border?
Depends how it went with the border.
Okay.
Okay.
What's that's just like such an obviously like what?
Have you ever done asylum work?
Done what?
Like asylum work? Have you been involved in any of that ever?
Yeah. When I graduated Yale, the first big law firm I worked at made us do pro bono work down at the border. So I had a ton of. No, I haven't done any asylum work. No, obviously no.
You seem like you're that kind of guy.
Yeah.
I saw the diplomas in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first Trump administration, one of the things that he did is that he changed the order that asylum applications were processed by judges. So it used to be first in, first out. He changed it to
the most recent ones. Yeah.
What that does is it disincentivizes crossings.
Sure, but it also makes it so people who applied first are now waiting infinitely longer for their actual cases to be processed.
Yeah, though I can tell you, because I do a lot of asylum work, that I had a client at the time who was waiting to be processed, and he was delighted because that meant he got to stay in the country for years without having any risk of losing his status. So if you're at the bottom of the pile, it's not bad for you; it's good for you.
I mean, except you're in a limbo and you're not entirely sure what your future is going to look like, but.
Well, if you look at stats, like, I mean, I don't know everyone in the country, but like, you look at like, for example, like Florida, I think it's like 3/4 to maybe even 5/6 of asylum cases are losing once they go to court. Like
nowadays, I think those numbers have changed significantly over the past 5 years as people have abused the fuck out of the asylum system. Yeah.
I would totally agree. And the asylum system is one of those areas where that really does need reform.
Yes,
but
which is one of those things that Bill would have done, but
yeah, it desperately needs it. But you all like that switch that Trump did in the first administration is an example of something the executive can do to partially ameliorate the problem, while at the same time, even if Congress hasn't gotten around to fixing it yet, and they likely probably won't, given the state of things right now. Though who knows? Maybe, and I'm fingers crossed, I'm hoping that the Democratic Party doesn't go like full Obama-McConnell era resistance party and instead picks like their spots a little bit more carefully. So maybe if they're doing that, maybe they could get a border bill passed.
Why? Why shouldn't they go? They should go full McConnell resistance, no? The Republicans rewarded so handsomely for it.
I think the Republicans were rewarded for so handsomely, and this is just going to be a difference of opinion, because I don't think there's the way to prove this or disprove it. I think that the Democratic Party's base is not the Republican Party's base.
Yeah, they actually care about rule of law and governance and some semblance of morality.
I don't think that kind of obstructionism is going to be rewarded. Like you saw, like at the State of the Union, I don't think that there was like a unified Democratic response where people were like, "Yeah, those signs were so awesome. Shake that cane. This is really working." I think that
hold on. Okay, I've said this a few times. Will you acknowledge that is true, but the playing field is not level? Like the conservative media environment has fully embraced lying and defamation. They fully embraced misinformation. They fully embraced illegality and well, I'll say questionable legality, because of course we're still figuring that out. So yeah, it's a very difficult playing field.
The playing field is not level. The advantage the Democrats have in terms of like demographic playing field is that there are more Democrats. That's the big advantage, and that the people in the center, I think, could break left. The advantage that Republicans have is that their base is more cohesive. That's their big advantage. So when you get into a fractured information environment where everyone's hyper partisan and everything's like screaming and shouting and fucking yelling at people and, you know, your bad faith and this is going to be this crazy example, or for example, your stuff about talking about, you know, how happy you are that somebody got shot at Trump's assassination attempt in that rally. I think that information environment favors Republicans. I think that in a world where the way you win is that you meme and you edgelord and you get engagement, that is going to be a place where the more cohesive base unifies and has disproportionate power. And I think the Democrats need to find other ways of messaging. I don't think they can compete on that playing field. It doesn't work for them. But I mean, this is just my own interpretation. Like I said, it's not like I've just studied that I can cite on this point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you disagree? You think that you think that going that route is going to favor Democrats?
The 55% outcome, I think, right now is that despite how online everything is and how much even I get Twitter poison brained or whatever, in terms of actual true MAGA sycophants who would march and die with Trump, my guess is that's probably only like 20 to 30% of the Republican base, maybe more. But you only need to change like 4 to 5% of voters' minds to make a party basically completely unviable. My guess is going to be, with all the abhorrent economic policy, that the midterms are hopefully going to go well for the Democrats, because there's no way that so many people are going to be able to stomach whatever economic fallout comes from the insane tariffing and everything else going on. That'd be my guess. So my guess is going to be whatever Democrats do isn't going to matter that much because the economy is going to flip so hard. But I guess we'll see.
I mean, the economy, yeah, that would be one way to do it. I think the other way to do it, if I was a Democratic strategist, would be look at the fracture point on the right now, because there is one. There's essentially, I don't know what the right term is. It's like the woke right versus the non-woke right, we could call it, where, you know, like just the other day, there was like a huge thing on X about like everyone on the let's call it the woke right, talking about how terrible Justice Barrett is because she voted against Trump. I mean, she voted for him on immunity. You know, I mean, she voted to get rid of the right to abortion. Like, this has been, if you're a conservative, this has been a hugely successful justice. And if you're a lawyer,
where is this fracture point though on the right? I feel like every single person on the right was hating on Barrett. Who were the people defending her?
I mean, anyone who's
no, not anyone who's. I mean, like specifically, I don't think there was a single media person, single politician. Was there a single anybody that was defending Barrett here?
In terms of like media personalities, I'm not sure that I'm like fluent enough to know. I mean, I think in like my circles where it was like, what do like conservative lawyers think? What do like conservative professors type think? Yeah, everyone was defending her because she was A, probably right, and B, she's been a phenomenal justice, and C, you don't get to grade justices on whether they do what you want. That's just an inappropriate way to view a Supreme Court justice in general. And that's the argument that was made for decades against, you know, when people were complaining about originalism. It's like, you don't get to just judge them because you don't like what they do. You actually have to get into the nitty gritty of the law to have an opinion. So yeah, I mean, I saw pushback there, and I think that is a legitimate fracture point between people who are never die Trumpers and people who, no, I wouldn't even say like me. I say people like Lactoid would be a good example, who voted for Trump but had some like severe reservations about doing so.
I would be shocked if, given the lack of spine that degenerate fuck has, I would be shocked if he actually came out and defended Amy. If he did, my respect for him will increase 3 points. On Twitter, if I were to go and check, guys, did Lactoid actually defend Amy's decision?
I don't know if he did, by the way.
Okay.
He might have. I know I certainly did, but I'm not sure what position he took. Hopefully he did.
Okay. I'm just curious on that, but
yeah, I mean, I think that I think coming out of this presidency, if there's a party that can articulate clear, authentic, and believable principles, but that part of what people liked about Trump, by the way, is that even though he lies all the time, he's more or less doing what he said he was going to do. Now, it turns out a lot of that stuff maybe isn't stuff that you want him to do, but he, if he says he's going to go out and do something, he generally speaking tends to do it. And I think the left needs to find somebody who can project that level of authenticity, which is crazy. Like I said, he lies all the time. But with Harris, I don't think people believed her. I don't think people believed when she tacked center. I don't think people believed when she tried to say anything. I think that they viewed her as a creature of the establishment. And they need is somebody who can actually articulate a vision and make it believable, which is, by the way, how Biden won. It was his blueprint. It was Obama's blueprint. It was Clinton's blueprint. That's how Democrats win.
Okay. I mean, I think it all just now comes down to my argument now is I think we just live in an influencer economy when it comes to politics. And I think it's whoever can capture the most attention is the person that's going to win. And right now, Trump, not through any political ingeniousness of his own, but just due to the fact that he's an attention whore, has just mastered this particular environment because he loves attention. It's like how he exists.
I mean, I think you could make the argument he's the best that ever lived at that. Like, I mean, literally, I mean, that is his best skill is self-promotion, attention, media cycles. He's incredibly good at it. And I don't, if the Democratic strategy is to beat him at that game, I don't really see that happening. But then, we'll have Vance in 2028 and you've got to get another shot.
Yeah. True.
So at the end of this, it feels like I have not convinced you that this is not going to work out and that you should use your platform to try to find ways to pick the spots and articulate the policy that's going to resonate and guide the Democratic Party going forward. We're leaning into memes.
Oh no, I think I agree with that. I don't think I ever disagreed with that. I'm just it's just frustrating the supposedly centrist or supposedly center-right people who will infantilize and place so much defense for like clearly abhorrent Trump things, and then just be so harsh on hypothetical things that haven't happened or that didn't happen or that were overturned and then didn't go. It's just like that world is just very frustrating to me, I guess.
I get the frustration. I mean, I totally get that. I think the thing that's frustrating as somebody who like lives in that kind of like centrist, I couldn't vote for either of these candidates world, is that the fixation that every question gets turned into, oh, wasn't Trump worse? Every single time. Never is it, but we actually have a better answer.
It's a one-on-one election. What do you mean? Of course it's going to be who's better or who's worse.
I think that Biden won in part on the strength of not Trump.
Sure.
But I think that people tired of that. Like, I think that in a very real sense, the Democratic Party has become the party of not Trump, which gives him indirect control over their party, their policies and messaging. And it's a losing game. Like, the best, most plausible explanation for why border crossings increased under Biden is because he wanted to do the opposite of what Trump did. So he just reversed all the executive orders.
Okay, so that's just demonstrably not true, right? The best explanation for the massive surge in the beginning was because a ton of people didn't cross over COVID. The Cato Institute has done research, that's not even a debated topic. Now, could Biden have handled it better afterwards? Probably, yeah. I mean, border crossings in general, I'm sure tend to increase under Democrats, tend to be lower under Republicans, not to the massive extent that they are now, but the asylum process made this an extra bullshit thing to deal with because so many people realized they could abuse the system and it was backed up. So then you have to go through like catch and release and everything, and it's just super fucked. But
you can do what Obama did and be like an aggressive deporter. You know what I mean? Like the idea that like borders have to be open and largely unenforced is not a democratic platform.
Yeah, but the idea that there was no open and unenforced border under Biden, that's just not true. The most of the people coming in that were following the law, it was just the asylum law, which is fucked.
Well, and he was not doing anything to try to disincentivize that.
Well, they tried to pass a border bill that would have like helped a ton with that asylum process.
Yeah. But then when it didn't, when he couldn't, then he changed executive policy and the crossings went way down because it was beneficial in the election cycle. Like the numbers are
sure afterwards. But you would expect somebody who cares about
without the change in the law, because there's tons of stuff you can do at the executive level to make that change without the need of a change.
Maybe,
in law.
but who knows? Who knows how much of it will survive court challenges or whatever else? Because there's a lot of people that were paranoid that if you change asylum stuff, that there's like legal shit, that there are going to be challenges running through courts on that. Yeah, he did change it eventually, but like we should want Congress to be legislating on this rather than relying on the president to do everything through executive order.
We agree on this, but the point was, my point is not whether or not there should have been a bill. My point was, if you look at Biden's policy and you compare it to his predecessor, Obama's, you compare it to Trump's, the best explanation for the way he treated the border was it was good politics to do the opposite of what Trump did. It was good politics for a Democrat to say, look at me, I'm not Trump, I'm the opposite of Trump. I don't know if it was... just reverse his policies.
Like, I'm not going to say that this was a 0% influence, because I'm sure, especially with the cages and kids and all that bullshit or whatever, I'm sure that there was some...
I mean, you know better, didn't he reverse the executive orders? Like we know when Trump did his big signing, wasn't Biden's like big, like first couple days signing, reversing Trump's
I would have to go back and see which ones in particular they were, but the reality is that we had way bigger issues at the time, like COVID, which we were all still recovering from. But also, like, the last few months under Trump for border crossings were higher than any month under Obama. So these were coming up as COVID was like going away and everything. They were coming up anyway. They probably would have been really high under Trump. People like to cite things like remain in Mexico as being huge policies to help. But Donald Trump enacted these in 2019. It was like 40,000 people that this even impacted.
They're not high now.
They're not what?
They're not high now.
Sure, but they also started to not be high under the last several months of like Biden's admin either.
Because they were enforcing executive policy to make them go down. That's the point. Like, it was always an option. Could we do more if Congress was involved, and could we do it better? Because with Congress involved, you can be smarter. You can extend legal pathways. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with Congress involvement that would be better. Yes, absolutely. But you could make the numbers go down just through executive fiat, obviously, because we've seen it happen.
Yeah, I mean, you can, but I feel like... Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, if we just want infinitely expanding executive power, which I feel like was the thing you told me in the beginning that you were against, but I guess when it comes to matters of border enforcement, you're in favor of it, even though, and then you cite the original founding of the country, even though that has to do with like times of war and emergencies and not actual immigration policy. But I mean, I don't know what you want.
I think there are things that the president clearly needs to have control or at least heavy influence over.
Sure, but the president of the United States of America should not be, can we agree, the president of the United States of America should not be unilaterally deciding immigration or border policy?
I don't think he does, but he has a lot of discretion.
Yeah, but the discretion should be like for times of emergency, like national emergency stuff.
No, not in this area. No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, because if you think about like the president has a lot of ability to tell the military what to do. He has a lot of ability to tell prosecutors what the priorities are and what they should prosecute. He has a lot of authority to tell the border agency what they should be doing, how they should be enforced, like how you enforce the law, you execute the law is the core executive function. So yeah, he has a lot of power over how the border policy is enforced, because enforcing laws like that is what the president does.
Yeah, we're not talking about enforcement of the law. We're talking about special things that the executive...
We are absolutely talking about enforcement of the law.
When we're talking about like temporary protected status, or we're talking about passing executive orders to like limit the maximum number of asylum claim people per day or whatever. This is not just a simply matter of like enforcing the law. This is a matter of like, for instance, would you say DACA was just Obama enforcing the law?
I don't know enough about it to speak on that intelligently.
Okay.
I could guess, but
if you for guessing,
I think
I like DACA, and that I like that there are kids in the United States that I don't think should be deported from like a moral level. From a legal level, I think DACA is an utter failure, because it shows that Congress wasn't able to do anything about immigration, and now the president has unilaterally done something about immigration that could theoretically be undone by a future president, which I think should always be the concern. Yeah. If you're happy with how Trump is managing the border now, and he doesn't pass any legislation, then if a Democrat comes in and undoes it all because like, well, I'm going to change this executive order, well, what the fuck have we gotten? What have we accomplished?
Yeah. The question isn't whether or not we should pass a law. I think we both agree that we should. The question was whether or not it's appropriate for the president to have a lot of discretion in the play in the joints in this area. And I'm just saying he does, because this is an enforcement area. Just like the president has a lot of power in determining how his various agencies select and prosecute crimes, or what the
I
priorities
don't know. I
are.
disagree that this is just setting a cap for number of people that can come through a day. I don't think that's just a question of enforcement. That feels like a law.
For
That
example,
feels
when
like
he said we're going to look at asylum cases last in first out.
that's a question of enforcement. That's like maybe sure.
Yeah, that's a thing that he did because it's within his power to do so. It's within his discretion to set that policy. It's not if Congress
Sure, but I don't think that was the huge mover on the. Yeah, but I don't think that was the huge mover on people coming in and claiming asylum or people illegally immigrating. I don't think that was like the huge thing that was determining that. I think it has more to do with, because wasn't Biden's big change at the end as he finally just said, "Fuck it, I'm going to cap." He put one of the things that was in the bill. He said he was going to cap like the daily crossings or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think these are things that have a bigger impact, but.
I think those have a big impact. But then the other thing is, well, this is where it gets a little complicated. But there's the incentives you're creating, and the target audiences are 2 or 3-fold at least. It's like how is America perceived by people in other countries who might not have the best access to information about American policy? It's like, oh, this guy really is in favor of immigration. This guy, it's like a yes or no, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And maybe I'm going to go or not go based off of that. And then there's incentives that are sent to lawyers and people who do asylum work about what your chances are, how is this going to go, what advice am I giving you? And then there's some people in between, like the people who are helping in Mexico, the people who are trying to come up with systems to help people who are getting asylum, providing resources, providing assistance, who have more information. And that information does get passed on. And I think that the incentives change the way people perceive it. So something like Remain in Mexico, it's not necessarily about, in many ways, what it really does do is create an incentive not to seek asylum versus anything else. Like, you just don't get to have the benefit of being in the country while you wait for your application to process, which is the major draw for a lot of people seeking asylum.
Okay.
And by the way,
if that's sure. But if we wanted to go with like a more nebulous answer like that, I don't mean to load that negatively, nebulous, but like just like a harder to prove, then in that case, wouldn't we blame Republicans for constantly saying it's an open border, it's an open border, it's an open border under Democrats when it wasn't really an open border? But isn't the Republicans saying that and messaging on that over and over again, also encouraging people to illegally immigrate here?
Probably in some small amount. I think it was. I think that the perception was probably already that because it was an easier time to immigrate, but I don't think the Republican messaging helped.
Sure. Do you acknowledge that the illegal immigration numbers in the last few months for Trump, they were climbing, they were exploding, they were higher than any of the quarters or any of the months under Obama? Are you aware of that?
I think that Obama had a better immigration policy than Trump does. I don't
That's
know.
not what I said. I'm saying, okay. Because Trump shows a chart showing his thing, but the last like 4 months he gives to Biden, but it's his. But
yeah, I haven't compared him to Obama, so I'm going to take your word for the numbers. I think Obama's policy was better. I don't know that DACA, like you said, it was perfect. It's not something I've looked into greatly, and it certainly from the outside looking in has some flaws. But if you want to remedy illegal immigration, a combination of strict enforcement, disincentives like deporting people while creating preferred legal pathways so that when people get disincentivized, they get funneled into better pathways is like clearly the best way to attack the problem. Like, why wouldn't you use the carrot and the stick when they're both available?
Sure.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it was better. But again, I voted for Obama twice. So this isn't terribly surprising for me.
Sure. Are you worried at all on like a foreign appearance state where the U.S. is right now in the world, or?
Yes. I think that, you ever done like a card trick, or like any kind of like that kind of like bullshitty magic stuff?
Sure.
So I used to do this card trick. It was pretty good, but one of the things about the trick was the patter was you had to make it look like you were fucking up the whole time.
Yeah.
Right. So you're shit talking yourself. And you say, "Oh, I fucked it up," and then you pull off the big reveal at the end, right? And once I was at a party and was doing this trick and I actually fucked it up. So I spent like 5 minutes shit talking myself about how I was gonna fuck it up, and then I fuck it up, and now I'm like, okay, well, I just have to leave now, right? Like, there's no recovering from this. Like, you're an idiot forever. The thing about like the Trump 4D chess argument is he's doing all this stuff, and his negotiating style thrives on chaos. And yeah, if he pulls something off, he might look like a genius at the end of it. But the flip side of that is if you don't pull something off, you look like an absolute clown. And right now, if you're going to impose tariffs on our closest neighbors, which everyone knows tariffs are a bad economic policy, like anyone with any brain in their head knows that. So unless you're going to pull some rabbit out of the hat and this does something miraculous for you down the road, you're going to look pretty foolish. So we'll see. I mean, I think that's like a swing for the fences type thing. It's not a good look right now, certainly. I don't think we disagree on tariffs. So
no, we completely and totally disagree. But I don't know what I would argue there's already been irreparable damage done to the reputation of the United States, and it's not acceptable to negotiate with people by engaging in the most threatening, unhinged behavior possible that's already done economic damage, and then coming back later. Like, there's no other area in life where we would accept that type of behavior, but for some reason, for Trump, it's like epic and it's okay. Like, I just don't understand that.
Well, it's the problem with it is that he treats these negotiations as if you aren't in a repeat player scenario. Like this style of negotiation works. It's at its best when you're in a one-off scenario. Like I want to make one deal. So what I'm going to do is destabilize everything and apply maximum pressure. And I'm going to make the deal. We're going to ride off into the sunset, and I don't have to see or hear from you again. Right? But if you have to work with this person every day and you just screwed them over really badly, they're going to remember that. And it makes the next deal much harder.
In that case, let's assume that even would be a good strategy for the first thing. In that case, then we've just said he's doing a bad thing. Because these are countries that are.
I don't think we disagree on tariffs. I think it's a.
Well, but it's not a bad thing if it continues to happen. It's not a bad thing unless it's it's already been like a horrible reputational hit that's going to take us a long time to overcome.
Yeah. And I think that's what I mean. I think we agree. Like the reason I gave the card playing analogy is you have to pull off something really great.
Yeah, but even if he pulls off something really great, it's still not good. What they're like our allies. We can just negotiate with them, right?
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I have not seen anything yet that would justify the harm that he's done to our relations with these countries.
Wait, I don't know. Okay, you seem like a friendly guy. I think
we're not disagreeing.
No, we are disagreeing. If you and I were hanging out, okay, and I wanted to order a pizza and you wanted to order a pizza, and you said, "What toppings do you want?" And I pull out a machine gun and I aim it at your head and I say, "I want an all meat pizza." Would you say, "Well, Destiny's negotiating style is really insane here, but if the guy orders, say, like 2 all meat pizzas, then it was okay to do that"? Would you ever make that claim?
No, I'm saying if you pull out the machine gun and then as a result we get our meat pizza and the cure for cancer, I'm going to wonder whether or not you were onto something. Okay. But if you don't get the cure for cancer, then you're just an asshole with a machine gun. And it's looking like we're in the asshole with a machine gun territory. I'm just saying what it would require to fix the problem.
Okay. Well, I'm curious. In the first 4 years of Trump,
I don't think we disagree. I think there would have to be some kind of unlikely big payoff scenario for this to make sense.
In the first 4 years of Trump, has any of this wacky negotiating stuff ever worked out in favor of the United States? Because I keep hearing he's a great negotiator and this is what he does and it's just a first offer, blah, blah, blah. But I can't think of a single example of this ever being beneficial for us.
Yeah,
ever.
I'm trying to think about that. The tariffs on China were apparently a good enough thing to keep. So that seemed to be a good idea.
So one of the things for tariffs is if when you enact a tariff and the other person matches, it's very easy to enact tariffs. So to sustain them, to bring them down requires like a bilateral negotiation. It's pretty hard. And the tariffs that Trump did damage American industry, especially soybean farmers and steel, and we had to subsidize. So those weren't successful tariffs.
But they were tariffs that the next administration kept, and that we were
because we didn't engage in a bilateral negotiation with China to work out a new trade deal to bring it down.
This is going to be a tricky area for me because it's like in foreign policy, I tend to hold positions that neither party likes. So I'm going to disagree with Trump almost completely on most areas, but it's not going to be. It's not that the Democratic Party abandoned these things too. Like, I mean, truthfully, like talk about the tariffs on China. Back when Hillary was running, we had the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, and I was in Europe studying international law when that was being negotiated, and I can tell you that like the thing that they were doing in Brussels and the lawyers who were working on it, its big purpose was to create leverage with China in upcoming trade negotiations so that you could force them to play fair on things like monetary policy, intellectual property, and all the various areas where China is viciously unfair in the open market without resorting to tariffs.
Sure.
And then that got scrapped because we just had a wave of populism that hit, and now all of a sudden you're a globalist if you want an international trade agreement. But like in reality, this whole tariff mess is attempting to solve the problem that was created by the absence of the transatlantic trade partnership, which was designed to solve exactly this problem, and we gave up for fucking nothing.
Sure.
So,
well, listen, I can agree with you on that. I was a huge TPP fan. Wait, but what does the TPP have to do with tariffing Mexico and Canada?
I think those are insane things to do. It's ridiculous.
Okay. And then like
we agree.
leaving NATO and attacking the European Union.
We haven't left NATO. That would be ridiculous, by the way. That would be like...
Okay, Trump's comments about how he doesn't think NATO would help us, even though the only people who've triggered Article 5 were the United States, and every country did come to help us after 9/11.
I think that if you look at Ukraine, and this is going to be, again, one of those areas where, like, I don't want Trump to do what he promised to do, but I recognize that he promised to do it. So, like, if your goal is to get peace in Ukraine, I think you've said this about Israel and Ukraine a number of times, where it's like, there's a difference between peace and justice. Like, the question with peace is always on what terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if your goal is peace, well, Russia has a bunch of territory. The only way you're going to get peace is to get Ukraine to give up that territory if your goal is peace right away. And if that's your goal, then you're going to have to play hardball with Ukraine, which I don't think should be the goal. But if that is your goal, then you kind of have to do that.
Why do you have to play hardball with Ukraine to make them surrender? You're just... What's the point of the United States being involved in that negotiation then? Like, why does the Ukraine need the U.S. to surrender?
The U.S., technically speaking, doesn't. I think that what he promised to do was to create peace. That was his campaign promise, and he's attempting to live up to that.
Yeah, but what's the difference between Ukraine doing peace versus just a full surrender? What's Russia being asked to give up here? It just sounds like a full surrender.
Yeah, I think it's trending in that direction. But I don't think he should do that.
Okay.
I think that it's one of those, like, I told you the story the last time we talked.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's apocryphal. I don't know if it's real or not. But in legal circles, there's a story about Trump where he was his lawyers were negotiating a real estate deal, and it was slowing down, and he got frustrated, and he showed up, and he yelled at his fucking team in earshot of the other negotiating team, like, you motherfuckers, you better get this deal done. If you come back to me today and there's not a deal in principle, you're all gonna be like that sort of Trumpy thing, right? So they go back in, and obviously they struck a deal, but they struck it on terrible terms because the other side knew you have to make a deal today or you're going to get fired. So we have all the leverage now. Are we going to strike a deal? Yeah, but it's going to be a terrible deal. That's the problem with coming out and saying, like, we need to have peace. I'm going to negotiate a peace deal instantly. You can get one, but it's going to be on terrible terms because the only way you could get a peace deal in those scenarios is to force Ukraine to make massive concessions. It's the only possible way to do it. So I just think it's a shitty thing to do.
Okay. And it seems like he's mad because
people voted for him to do it.
Well, he promised to also fix them both on day one, Israel and Ukraine, and that hasn't happened. He's upset now because he's frozen funds to Ukraine, and now more Ukrainians are dying because Russia's just fucking bombing whatever the fuck now. Because
but this is the fucked up state. This is the fucked up place of our politics, right? Like, did you watch the Republican primary debates?
Like 10 years ago or whatever.
No. I mean, 10 years. This cycle. When,
like Nikki Haley and the one other and DeSantis argued or something?
Yeah, no. When Pence stood up and he was like, and Pence was never going to win anything, and he got like lampooned on social media for saying this, but he stood up and he just said, like, things haven't changed. Like, we are, the arsenal of democracy. We fight against evil powers because it is in our best interest to do so, because we like Western values, because we like projecting Western power, because we like Pax Americana, and we subsidize these efforts because it is in our power to do so and in our interest to do so. So we should. And I mean, he got like booed out of the convention hall and booed out of the Republican primary. So like, it's obviously very bad politics. The problem is that, like, I agreed with him, but that just means that I'm not like a 98-2 because most of the Democratic Party also disagrees with that in the way he stated it, and all the Republican Party does. So, 98-2 might be an exaggeration, but it's certainly an 80-20 issue. So I'm just recognizing I'm in the extreme minority and people disagree with my worldview on this point. And it's the same reason, by the way, that I'm very supportive of Israel. I like Western power. I like Western values. I like Pax Americana. I think these are good things. I think it's worth it for America to spend money on them.
Mm-hmm.
But, that is, in an age of populism, not a popular perspective.
Okay. Yeah, what do you think about the whole Eric Adams stuff?
That was rough, man. I tell you why it was rough. If you really thought it was unfair, pardon him. Right? Like what? If I recall correctly, it was a federal investigation.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think he didn't pardon him, though?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's why it looks so rough. Because if you don't pardon him, and I think Pisco made this argument, so I want to give him his flowers because that's where I heard it first. But I don't know if you talk about the pardon, but if you don't pardon him, it does look like you're trying to keep the door open, which makes, and then when you have like the Homeland Security guys show up and say, we're doing this for leverage.
Yep.
Basically. And then like, oh no, we're joking. We weren't serious about that.
And you don't even have to pardon him. Like they could have dismissed the charges with prejudice. Yeah. But in Bovey's letter, he explicitly said two things. He said that they were dismissing they wanted to dismiss, well, he said three things. He said a lot, but the three big things were there was no evidence of corruption at all. He just said that it felt like a political prosecution. Mm-hmm. And then he said, we're going to drop these charges without prejudice. And he said, we're going to relook at this case again after the election in November for mayor.
Well, and I think this is, the absolute kind of like, for me, like the shit sandwich between these parties was on the right. I think you are seeing values that line up like I think Hania posted something about this recently where it's like a graph of like political values and the US right is getting closer and closer to like Turkey in terms of like what the political values look like on the whole. And then on the US left, you had kind of this idea that we should have something like resembling like the European Union administrative state, which is just constantly growing and having more and more impact.
Isn't the European Union administrative state trying to become more like the US federal government?
The EU has, well, they're meaningfully different in a number of ways. I'm not sure what you're asking.
I think the goal of the EU is to kind of be like the US federal government.
Yeah, they were trying to create an overarching system to unite Europe the way that we have, which is in some ways similar to our federal structure. But what I believe makes our structure work so well is the locality of it. The restriction where you start saying like we are only federalizing things that must be federal, and we're going to let decisions be made at the most local level that they can be when they can be. And the European government on the whole has been trending in the other direction. They've been increasing centralization rather than, and I think that we would be...
Well, of course, there's going to be an increase in centralization because they didn't have a federal body before like we do, right?
Yes, but if you look at like EU rules on basically anything like food, on trade, on anything, they're becoming highly intrusive, and there's increasing delegation. Just like
but that's becoming more like the U.S., right? Like in the United States, Nebraska can't negotiate its own trade deal with Poland, right? We have to, yeah.
I'm not sure. I think it's almost an irrelevancy. Okay. Like let's call that a direction. Let's call that a direction.
Sure.
And we can agree that EU and the Democratic left would like that direction. They're trending in that direction. That was the pitch. Was we're going to have a bigger, more expert, more expansive federal state that's going to fix these problems for you.
Sure. So I'm just curious on the Eric Adams thing in general. So on the left, what's like the equivalent left threat to you that's like comparable to that Eric Adams situation?
I don't think there probably is an equivalency on the left for that.
Okay.
Because I think that the things that the right does that are really problematic today are the things that trend in kind of like the autocratic direction, where you start saying like, we have a president who's not going to be restrained by norms and is just enforcing his wills and whims through the executive branch because he's just we've elected a personality who doesn't care about norms, which means that you're going to get a lot of norms violations, which is terrible, oftentimes truly terrible.
Sure. And maybe legal violations as well, right? Maybe, but
yeah, depends on what's happening. The thing the left does that is also problematic from my perspective is that they build structures within the government that then push in these directions regardless of whether or not people want them to. And that was what made the USAID stuff was not successful in terms of cutting the budget. It was not successful in terms of avoiding legal rakes. They've been stepping on rakes left and right. It was successful in terms of raising awareness of how much stuff happens in the federal government that people really have no idea about. And that it's just very hard for the average person to square or to understand why we're doing. And I think people want accountability there. And they view accountability as being that the president you elect could do something about it.
Sure, but the accountability that people are talking about is all been fictitiously put in front of them by Elon and Trump. Like, there already were Office of Inspector Generals. There already is the Office of Government Accountability. Like, these things exist. Like, a lot of the issues that they're bringing up now have been addressed in the past by, like, the OGI,
I think
or the Office of Inspector Generals.
You're probably going to end up seeing is that, like, money was allocated by Congress. I don't think Trump is going to win on impoundment. I think probably if he goes to the court, he's going to lose on that issue. I don't think you have a constitutional authority just to impound the money indefinitely. He might win on the Impoundment Act being technically wrong in some way or the other. But on the broader constitutional issue, I think he loses. But what you might start seeing is that, like, well, how specific was the delegation? Congress probably didn't delegate to this NGO or to this exact issue. They probably said something more along the lines of, we'd like to earmark $1 billion to fight AIDS in Africa.
Okay.
Right? It's probably more general. So then what you're probably going to start seeing is Trump saying, okay, well, if you're going to force me to spend the money, then I'm going to give it to the most, like, right-wing conservative NGO that promotes abstinence or whatever, whatever the own the lib tactic would be, to point out how crazy this system is.
Okay, hold on. Listen, what you're saying, this is what my issue is, I guess.
I think it's probably going to happen. I don't know if you disagree, but
my big issue is that the thing that I hate the most about, like, the disinformation environment that we live in, that people like Elon and Trump contribute to, but for some reason gets passed by people because, like, you'll say, well, at least now we're talking about it, is that now we can't have real conversations about it. So let's say, for instance, okay, so one of the things when Trump went to get rid of DACA, that was a big moment for me where I was like, ooh, okay, well, it kind of feels bad, I guess.
Did that give Musk a pass?
When you say, well, at least now we're having the conversation, rather than saying this is a wholly illegal endeavor that he absolutely should not be embarking on, it feels like a pass, yeah. But when DACA gets, when Trump attempts to cut away DACA, it makes me look at it and go, okay, we definitely need to have, like, a stronger immigration policy coming from Congress, because what can come from a president can be rescinded by a president. It's not good for major issues, right? I could agree. The only reason I'm not agreeing is because I just don't know the particulars. But, like, assuming everything you're saying is true, or let's say that the money's allocated in too generalized a way from Congress, right? I could agree that, okay, well, maybe this isn't ideal, or this could be done better. If Trump would have said something like, today, my cabinet members, I went to Marco Rubio and we saw that USAID gives all this money to all of these trans NGOs and blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? We looked at the appropriations from Congress and it said that they wanted to do this for social development. So we're actually going to give all of this money now to Christian organizations. Well, if that was the case, now I'm sitting here thinking, like, oof, well, we need to have these laws be made way more particularly from Congress. This is a legislation problem. Now, he didn't have to do anything illegal. He didn't do anything outside of the scope of his power. Arguably, he didn't even violate any norms. It's up to the departments to decide how they want to allocate contracts and money. Like, none of this needed TROs or Supreme Court insertions on fighting TROs to get this done. Why can't we just have a world where we have a real conversation about a thing and then we figure out how to deal with the thing, rather than some guy comes in with a nuclear bomb and then when we're going through the rubble go, oh, look, you see, the electricity was wired poorly in this house. You can tell by the way it fell over. Like, why not just have the actual conversation?
This is not an area where I think we're going to have like a ton of disagreement. I think that so when Ramaswamy left Doge, because I think he tweeted, I think it seemed like a really silly argument about a tweet, but whatever, he's gone. One of his pet project for Doge was, I thought, the thing that they were going to succeed on, which was in a post-Chevron world, have an initiative where you get the heads of every agency to review their regulations and then say, in light of Loper and Chevron deference being gone, we believe the following regulations are unconstitutional and we rescind them. Just wipe them off the books. And then that would be very hard to rebuild because you don't have Chevron deference if you try to rebuild the regulations in the next administration. So that would be a way to really trim down the scope of federal power and what agencies are regulating, that Doge could do, and could do, as you said, without stepping on like all these rakes where they're triggering TROs and all kinds of other problems. Now, the thing that Musk wants to do, if I'm being hyper charitable for a second.
Let's not.
Well, I think this is where things, where the big joke is that most of our budget is not discretionary. So even if you trimmed like the whole budget,
it's like 1.7 trillion is the discretionary spending. Yeah,
it's just not possible to like run down licenses for Windows or like Microsoft products or whatever and balance the budget. That's not going to happen. But where there probably are hundreds of billions of dollars lying around, which would be insufficient to balance the budget, but still be a huge deal, is in real fraud and real misappropriation. But to do that, you need treasury records of payments and you need DoD access.
Maybe.
Because that's where all the money is.
So here, this is the thing. Okay. So you said you've worked, you've done like legal stuff. I'm not gonna say litigation because you could theoretically do other things besides litigation, right? But you've like had a job as a lawyer, right?
Yeah, I've been practicing since 2016.
Okay. Do you agree that I'm at least like decently smart, right?
Seem like a reasonably smart guy.
Okay. Yeah. Do you think that I could audit your billable hours? Like if I were to request from you all of the things that you're billing clients and you were to give me your sheets, do you think I could audit those reasonably?
You specifically? I don't know. Do you have some kind of background that would help you do that?
Okay.
I mean,
wait, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. Because I don't. I have no fucking idea, right? If you show me like call with client, like 0.5 or whatever, and I'm like, really? Was it a 30-minute call? Do you bill for all of these? I don't know if I like this. And I just start like fucking with your timesheets. I imagine you're gonna look at me and you might say, if we're being nice, like, Steven, you're a smart guy and I appreciate that. But no offense, you have no fucking idea what any of the norms are here. You don't know what we should be billing for fucking anything. If you want to audit my shit, maybe you should actually get with either people that work in law or audit law firms or something like that, because you just have no idea, right? That's how I feel when it comes to the Doge, Elon Musk auditing stuff. When you say pulling payments from the Treasury, why the fuck would they have any idea what a thing should cost or what USAID should be spending on or what the DoD should be spending? Like, I don't think Elon Musk has any special access or special knowledge in this area.
Well, I think what they do have, and this is, again, being somewhat charitable because there's a ton of stuff that you said that I agree with, but they do have access to technological solutions that can help you identify things like fraudulent payments in advance.
Sure.
One of the things that happened, I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I'm going to do it from memory, but I think, as Social Security Administration said, in 2022, they had about like 13 point something, $7 billion of fraudulent payments issued, and they recovered like 5 point something of that ultimately.
It was like 40 to 60% or something recovered, something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. But
but also, just as a real quick thing on that, whether or not that's a good or bad amount of fraud, we have to know the percentage of the total expenditure, right? Because Social Security spends, is it like $2 or $3 trillion or something? It's a
huge amount. Yeah.
Sure.
So that doesn't mean that, like, I mean, it could be a very small amount of the pie, but at the same time, the odds that Social Security SSA caught all the fraud, infinitely low, right? And they didn't do it ahead of time; they did it after the fact, which is why they had to try to recover it.
Yeah, of course, to some extent.
So you could create solutions that helped you identify potentially fraudulent payments earlier. That could be a thing that saves tens or more
Sure.
billions of dollars
So,
a year. That
okay.
could be a big thing.
Yeah,
You
I'm
go
glad
to
you brought
the
this up.
DoD,
Just
and
real
you
quick on
start
Social
like-
Security. On Social Security. Okay, I love that point. Okay, and let's say that Elon Musk, because he has international clients or he does SpaceX, whatever bullshit. Let's say Elon Musk. Okay, and this was even within, I would argue, maybe a little outside it, but almost within the USDS's original mission. The United States Digital Service under Obama, that they try to say Doge is or whatever, right? Is if Elon would have gone to the SSA and said like, hey. First of all, can we request your thing? Because that's how we should do it. And then the SSA offers it and they're like, for some types of fraudulent payments, this is something from private industry. We can identify these ahead of time because we have this system. And then the SSA is able to implement that. They run it recursively, they make sure it works, and they implement it. That would be awesome. What you're talking about there, that would be so cool. That would be like the best. That's like, in my mind, that is the United States of America at its best. It's taking capital enterprise.
We totally agree that we should be doing that.
That would be awesome. Okay. But what are we talking about right now? Do you know what the biggest talking point is about Social Security? You heard it? Or what do you think is like the big thing we're talking about right now for Social Security? It's all dead people. Because right now, Elon Musk and Trump are spreading this bullshit that Social Security is paying out like 13 million people who are all over the age of like 130. And that's the main talking point.
I'm sure that whatever he's saying is wrong. I mean, didn't he at one point say that we cut like an $8 billion check and it was like actually 8 million?
Something, yeah.
Like,
there's been a couple things like that. But what I'm saying is,
a lot of
sure. But what I'm saying is, so what's happening? It goes back to my other point, and this is the thing I hate about disinformation is now we aren't having good conversations about Social Security. We aren't having good conversations about saving money. Now a lot of Americans just think, oh my God, 13 million people who are already dead are getting paid out by Social Security, which is just completely not true. So now we just don't even have any conversations about saving with Social Security. We're just focused on a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're asking whether I want to defend Elon's statements on X, you're asking the wrong guy. That I'm certainly not going to do that. But I do think that's the kind of thing, and I think we both would want Doge doing. Like I think for example, as the DoD's famously failed, what is it, 7 audits in a row? Is it 8? I can't remember.
So the way that the DoD thing works is they wanted to implement a new way of auditing, and they started it I think 6 or 7 audits ago. The DoD is never expected to pass these audits until I think 2028 is the first time they're supposed to be able to pass it. But passing these audits doesn't mean that the money is just gone. It just means that they're like implementing new accounting procedures to find things.
They can't connect it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like and that's even tricky because like then what's the definition of like waste? Because what you're going to find in the DoD is almost like socialism for the military-industrial complex, right? Where it's like, people are like, man, we want to get some tanks. They're like, and the DoD is like, well, we're not really fighting a land war where we'd be using tanks. What we need is drones. And they're like, yeah, but they're built in my district, so you're getting a lot of money to build tanks. It's like, is that waste? Is that waste or fraud?
No,
probably not.
Not waste, fraud, or
but
abuse.
It's certainly a problem.
Sure, it can be a problem, but that's a legislative problem, right?
It is. Yeah, and I don't think you could. Doge certainly couldn't fix that. They could probably identify it.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
One of the things you're hitting on here that is so frustrating is that like these are problems that need to be fixed, and these band-aids, like, well, Doge can come in and fix the fact that people like to fight for pork in bills in Congress. Well, they can't fix that problem. That's a hard problem that if you really want to fix it, you have to really combat that.
This is what drives me fucking crazy because it's like I agree with you. Like it's like are Trump and Elon like the guys I would pick to do this? Like, hell no. Obviously no. But they seem to be the only game in town. Like I agree with everything you said about like we should be modernizing Social Security payments. We should be looking at what how we're allocating military money so we're not spending money on stuff that the military itself doesn't even want. Like these are no-brainers. So
when you say they're the only game in town, it's like saying like I really wish that young girls would have better role models who would maybe like pay them for work and stuff in life. And Epstein was the only guy doing that for some of these girls. So like, was it perfect? Maybe not, but at least somebody was like looking into them. Like this is what this sounds like to me, and I can't understand this argument. It's just they're not the only game in town. They're not doing things legally, probably. The challenges they're bringing up are totally not like.
If let's say you care about something,
yes.
right? We can pick whatever it is. In this case, it's the budget, it's deregulation, whatever. You care about it.
Yeah.
Your options are one party that, whatever their level of expertise, has no interest in the topic at all, and another party that's going to try, but you don't really think they're picking the best people.
And they're doing it illegally. It's not just the best people. They're not even really combating it, I don't think.
That's what I mean by the only game in town. Now, I didn't vote for them for reasons that we got into last time, so I don't need to bore you with it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if the Democrats had a policy platform that actually was the sensible alternative to what's happening, I think they'd be in a much better place. And they should, because the stuff we're talking about, I think, is a universal area of agreement.
But
like,
the problem
these are
is
80-20 issues.
I call these, I've heard these called like truisms. I don't know. This is my hot take, Republicans included. I don't think people actually do want a decrease in the size of the federal government. I think they want a number to go down, or they want to talk about bureaucratic bloat. But you talk to those same people. We want to cut the bureaucracy. All right, well, here's some cuts we've got lined up for the VA. No, not that. Okay, well, we got to look at Social Security or Medicare. No, not that. Okay, well, that's like fucking 3/4 of our budget. What about the military? No, America first. We need a strong military. Okay, well, that's our biggest line item on the discretionary spending. How about trans dances in Morocco? That one. Okay, well, that's $500,000. So like, at the end of the day, like, people have to be willing, and this is where like the brave leadership comes in. Like, who wants to come out and say, hey, we need to make these cuts? But instead, we've got a promise from Trump that waste, fraud, and abuse is going to get rid of like 50% of our spending, right? Ilana said 1 trillion, 2 trillion. And then on top of it, Trump is talking about extending the tax cuts, and we're tariffing everybody to decrease the size of our economy. Everything we're doing is heading to a huger deficit. The Republicans asked for a $4 trillion lift on the spending. So like, what's happening? What they're not doing? They're not even doing the things we want them to do.
I was with Thomas Massey on that. I thought he was 100% right, which is like, if you're going to be serious about cutting the deficit, you can't vote to extend it the way that they did.
Yeah,
like,
or why not at the very least fully fund your IRS? Why are we cutting from the IRS?
Yeah. I mean, I think the way Massey phrased it, which I thought was interesting, is he called it a tax holiday, right? Because it was a temporary tax cut under Trump, which is very popular. This is the problem, is that like, free money is always very popular.
Yes.
It's, of course, right? So then voting against free money is very hard. But if you really want the federal government to be smaller, it needs to have less money and do less things. And that means you have to be willing, I think, as you just said articulately, like to bite the bullet and just say, like, yeah, like, when we cut this area, it is going to create hardships for people. And we expect that the states are going to have to pick up the slack.
Sure.
Like, they are going to, like,
or that the benefits to your tax cuts or whatever are going to make this better. Like, it's going to be, there might be some short-term pain, but we're going to go through some long-term stuff. And I would respect that. I'd be like, okay, at least we're having the conversation.
Well, and I think that's when America works the best. Also, by the way, is because, like, if you say, okay, the federal government's not doing X, Y, and Z thing, we're no longer helping you in this way. The states can. They're free to. And then you can decide. You're like, not everyone's fully mobile. I understand that. But like, you end up in a laboratory of democracy and you say, like, okay, in California, they have higher taxes, but they do provide this benefit. If you live in North Carolina, there's lower taxes and they don't. And then we can see how people vote with their feet and what works and who gets voted out of office and gets voted in. And I think we actually end up with better policy. And sometimes we end up with reasonable disagreement. And states are just different. And that's fine too. But you can't expect to cut the federal government and expect the federal government to be all things for all people. You just can't. It's insane.
Yeah, but we're not having that conversation. We're talking about insane shit. We're just talking about insane shit. That's the thing that I guess is the most.
So who on the left can be the standard bearer who shows up and is like, no, here's a sane version of this? Because one of the benefits of having like two-party system historically was that they kept each other in check. Because if your shit got too crazy, people would just vote for the other guy, right? And one of the things that's happened is that the right has gone into a cult of personality mode, clearly. The other thing that's happened is that the left, for whatever reason, has embraced a bunch of 80-20 issues, where, like the women in sport, trans women in sports is an 80-20 issue. The issue with Israel wasn't quite 80-20, but it was bordering on it. There's common sense. It's better now, but like the version of DEI stuff that was happening during the BLM era, like there's
Sure, the left needs to do a better job of messaging. I don't disagree with you on that, but I don't like the idea that like if the left doesn't lose, my country is sliding into civil war.
So who's the person on the left who can articulate this sort of vision, where I think you and I agree on a bunch of stuff and can sell that to the American people in a way that sounds like the common sense it is?
I don't know. We've got 4 years to find out, I guess.
I just don't see the fucking person. And that's the problem. Like, I see Buttigieg and Newsom trying, but I don't think either of them can win. So I don't know who it is. Like, who has credibility, who can talk like a sane human and not be branded with, you know, this sort of like.
Yeah, I agree. It's the thing they have to work on, I guess. But it also is frustrating to me that like the fact that we can talk about, you know, conservative, like spending for the federal government or our debt, right? Why do conservatives get to act like they have the moral high ground on that when conservatives have increased the debt? Like every time they've increased our budget deficit every single time they've come into office. After Democrats had to clean up the pieces from the last like catastrophe that they've come into office on, right? Donald Trump increased his spending after he came in after Obama, and that was after Obama had to clean up from the 2007-2008 worldwide economic collapse. You know, Biden had to come in cleaning up after the disaster that was fucking COVID, and now Trump is talking about extending tax cuts, contracting the economy through tariffs, and not making any real spending cuts. So it's is Trump going to have a bigger budget deficit than Biden did in his last few years? But somehow Republicans never get any accountability for any of this. How?
Well, this is why I got so frustrated with the Democrats during the last cycle. Where it's just like, yeah, I think this is like a layup. I think this is a layup for the Democratic Party. Trump's record on the deficit in his first term, and you can talk about COVID, which of course has a huge impact, but was not good. He has no track record of being a successful deficit hawk. So this should be an issue where the left could like easily win if they had a cognizant platform of how they were planning to attack the deficit.
Yeah, sure, but I guess the issue is that it's hard.
I don't understand why they don't.
Because it's hard. Because it's hard. Because at the end of the day, conservatives will just lie. A Democrat could come up and say, rightfully, "Listen, we can't afford these tax cuts. It's going to fuck our deficit over." But then the conservative will say, "We're going to do tax cuts and fix the deficit," which, by the way, is exactly what they're saying. That's a lie, but people vote for it. They like that. So what do you do? How do you counter that? Look at this chart. No one cares.
You have to actually have a message on the issue that resonates with people. And I think the problem with Harris ultimately was that people just didn't believe her. They didn't find her authentic. They didn't believe that she had anything that was approaching a real principled approach that she was going to execute if she was put in office. And that's a shame, because like, you know, you were running against Donald Trump, the threat to democracy, right? Like this would be the time to put your best foot forward, and it was a disaster.
Yeah, I agree. They have messaging issues. I'm not disagreeing on that. I guess it's just part of it is the fact that like conservatives have built like this entire media apparatus from start to finish where they're willing to like are you familiar with like I don't know if we've talked about this before, but are you familiar with the Dominion case for Fox?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that's equivalent to that on the left side. And what was the punishment for Fox for that? They paid out a huge settlement, sure, but they've just continued to grow in terms of market share as cable news network. I think Fox might be larger now, I think, than CNN and MSNBC combined.
I would be unsurprised if they have a
So do you just
share.
Should Democrats be like, okay, well fuck it, we're just gonna start fucking lying too, I guess? Like is that
I think what Democrats need to do is readjust their what they consider to be like their tentpole issues. Because if you think about like what happened to the left, at least is my diagnosis, and we talked about this briefly last time, they came to this point where they were saying like, well, we disagree about a lot of stuff. We don't need to go philosophy bro, but we don't quite have a cohesive like Christian moral center like the right might. So like we need to decide what our morals are, and we need to come up with something that's solid that everyone agrees on. And they landed on like racism is bad, and they land stuff like that. And they ran with it really successfully for a very long time, and then it kind of metastasized and got away from them. And they need to have a new identity of what their moral center is, because it can't be Ibram X. Kendi's, you know, anti-racism stuff. That like it doesn't work. It's the population's turned on it, and correctly so, because it jumps the shark. It you know, saying that
I don't disagree. We're all professors. Yeah, it was fucking retarded. Yeah.
Exactly. It was a very bad idea, you know. And what has to happen is the Sister Soldier moment, and then the rebrand, where you say like, okay, our new centerpiece is this. Is it responsible government? You know, what is it? Like, what is the thing that we agree on that is our party's message and center? Because right now, I have no idea what it is, and I would love for there to be a functioning Democratic Party, but I just have no idea what their stance is, other than like, you know, they hate Trump, and you can get into whether or not that's right or not, but
sure.
I don't know what they stand for.
I'm curious, what do you think MAGA stands for?
like you mean like the cult of personality version?
There's MAGA in general. I guess like Trump and his, what does he stand for?
Yeah, I think that they just love Trump. I think that a portion of his base, probably a significant portion of his base, is almost indifferent to what he does because they just love him. And then I think there's another portion of his base, and it sounds like you disagree, but this is where I put someone like Lactoid or like Rob Noor, who they have policy prescriptions that they think he's better on, and they care about those issues quite a lot. And then they're willing to stomach a certain amount of his behavior, even if it violates principles that other principles they care about, because they think it's worth it in the end. And when the last time I talked to Rob, that's basically what he said. Whereas like I told him I couldn't vote for Trump, even though I thought he was better on a lot of issues, because the false slate of electors and telling Pence that you can certify, it's basically like it's up to you if you certify the election or not, is like it's an uncrossable norm. Like
Don't say that because it's not that uncrossable, because you can still abstain from voting apparently.
Yeah, but so and what Rob said was, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think I'm paraphrasing right. He agreed that is like objectively wrong and should never happen, but under the circumstances found that he could excuse it. And that's just not kind of how I roll. Like it is. You can't do that in my mind. Like there is a bridge too far eventually. But I think there are people who are in that camp where they're troubled by his excesses, but they think it's justified by X, Y, and Z thing. And to a certain extent, those people are up for grabs. I don't know if Rob is, but there are certainly people who are up for grabs if the Democratic messaging was better and if their policy was better, if they were actually speaking to people where they live and not taking the 20 on these easy 80-20 culture war issues, which is like an absurd thing to do. And you do see people like who am I thinking? Brianna Wu is an example of somebody who I think has been cognizant of this, where she's really changed the way she approaches her messaging to try to, because there is a version of trans rights that I think is very palatable, especially to like a libertarian. It's an easy sell to a libertarian, right? But that's not the version that was being sold in like 2022, 2023.
Sure.
And I think you agree. I think I remember you arguing with people about this.
Yeah, I agree with these things. The thing that I have difficulty is that like right now we're discussing messaging issues, and I would agree that the Democrats have failed a bit, if not on messaging extremist stuff, at least not pushing back on it in their own wing. But then the weird thing is that when I'll talk to people who just seem to have a lot of messaging critiques for Democrats, even though I acknowledge they have a lot of messaging issues, it's like voting is like no contest. It's so obviously one over the other. But then the people that I'm talking to that just point out all the messaging issues will say, well, I actually don't even know if I would vote for them either. And it's like, okay, wait. So then it feels like it's not actually messaging issues. It feels like there's deeper concerns here at play. But
you're talking to me, and yeah. I voted for a Democrat in every election that I was eligible to vote in my entire life until the last cycle.
Sure, and that's like saying you're being accused of rape, but you've asked like every single girl if you could fuck them, except for the last one that you didn't. That's not relevant. We're not talking about that. I don't know why you keep bringing that up. I'm talking about the last election.
Because it's not at all like that. What it's like is that there were norms that I cared about and thought that the Democratic Party was consistently upholding that they moved away from. And I think that they actually can fix this. I think it is fixable. And I would be delighted. And some of that's messaging, but some of that is substance. Like if you're the party that's endorsing racial preferences, you're going to lose a lot of people. If you're the party that's endorsing, men need to suck it up, they have no problems because they're the party, they're the oppressors historically, you're going to lose the male vote.
Sure, but we're not talking about, wait, but this is about you in particular, not just everybody else. I agree with all these issues, by the way. When I was interviewing DNC candidates, I think I might even did it the day you were there, and I asked every single one that I got to talk to, what would you say to white men? And none of them had an answer to that. I think it's a bad thing. But like, it's not like, well, that's a bad thing, so now I'm not voting for them because I think that Trump is probably just as bad. Like, it's still not even close in my head, I guess, but.
Yeah, but our politics are meaningfully different. Like,
oh, sure.
I prefer the judges that he appointed. So like the fact that he's going to appoint originalists is like a big deal to me. Now, was it a big enough deal for me to vote for him? No. But the fact that like Harris would appoint justices that I would not want on the court is a problem for me. Like
could Trump do anything that like constitutionally crosses the line for you where you're like, oof?
Did. That's why I didn't vote for him.
Oh, but I guess constitutionally crosses the line such that you'd consider voting for the other side, or is it both just like one deal breaker means it doesn't matter how bad the other one is?
Well, I think there's two different questions. One is, can I vote for this person? And the answer was no.
Yeah. Okay. So
And
let's
then
say
the other
right now
person-
today, let's say that like.
the other person is, do I want them to win? The problem.
Sure,
with
here, well,
Harris
okay,
is
that's
that
not, I'm not asking anything. I'm not asking anything that philosophical. Let's say last election cycle, Hitler comes back to life. Hitler's running, and it's Hitler versus Kamala Harris. Do you say like I'm standing for the vote, or do you vote for Kamala?
No, you have Kamala there, but this is actually the problem, right? Because Trump is many things, many of them bad. He's not Hitler.
I didn't say
And
Trump was Hitler.
the-
I didn't say Trump was Hitler. I'm just curious. Is it like if they cross a line, then you can't vote for them, or is there still some comparison going? Because you make it sound like, well, I'm not going to support Trump. I'm not supporting Trump. Stop attacking me for supporting Trump. It's like, okay, what about Kamala? It's like, well, I just don't want to vote for this reason. It's like, but isn't it a comparison between the two? And it's like, no, Kamala just like crossed the line for me. It's like, okay, what if it was against Hitler? Well, no, then I would vote for Kamala. Okay, so then.
You have other options, right? You know, like you don't have to vote. You don't have to vote for either party. You can vote for a third party. Like there are
Come
other
on.
options
No,
other than
it's one or the other, right? Realistically, no third party is winning.
I mean, clearly it's not because I took the third option. So like the third option exists, right? Like you, it's
Yeah,
not
but that's
like,
not a meaningful answer to the question. So if it was Kamala versus Hitler, would you vote for Jill Stein or RFK? Would you vote third party then?
No, I was not.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then
But-
obviously
but-
that's not at play here. That's not what we're talking about, right?
But the ridiculousness of the comparison is like the heart of the Democratic problem, where it's like
No, stop.
like-
It's not about the heart.
It is.
Everybody's Hitler. It's the
comparison.
question. And going back to my question then, because it seemed like you were saying this wasn't relevant, but it is relevant. What would Trump have to do to cross the line for you? And you said you already had. Well, not the Hitler line. What would Trump have to do to cross the line for you? Where you're like, ooh, I will vote for somebody that I probably ordinarily wouldn't necessarily vote for. What would he have to do for that?
That's an interesting question. I haven't given that a previous thought, so I don't know. I have the example off the top of my head. I think that there are probably scenarios in like rejecting Supreme Court orders that would do that for me.
Okay, so let's.
Like that,
I mean, obviously the
like,
one is.
I'm imagining something where like something goes to the court. The court says like absolutely this is a 9-0 issue. You can't do this. Everyone knows you can't do this.
Why did you hold on? Why did you say it's a 9-0 issue? Are you saying Trump could defy a 5-4 Supreme Court order?
No, I'm just trying to make the hypo as clear as possible.
Okay.
You know, and then in like the maximum hypo, and then Congress passes like some kind of like joint statement where they're like, yeah, you really should listen to the court, Trump. You're flying off the handle here, and then he violates the order anyway. So I'm trying to make the maximal crazy thing. Yeah, that would like obviously be a huge problem.
Okay.
And
If
then
the government doesn't go through then
hypothetical-
with following this TRO from the DC court, is that getting towards it for you? Because this is literally a thing that they, it's not a writ of certiorari, whatever it is for that. They asked the Supreme Court to review the TRO. If they reject that and they're like, fuck it, we're still going to violate that.
That's certainly getting close. Yeah, that's in the ballpark. I think that's a weird one because basically they're just ordering him to pay. Like as I read it, and I didn't study it deeply, but as I read it, the order was just you have to pay for work that was already done.
Yes.
So it's almost like a contract thing. Like they already did the work. Like,
It is
it's
a
not like we're
contract thing.
saying-
That's why it was such a strong, that's why the TRO was issued. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that seems pretty clear. You know,
Sure.
especially because that's gone to the Supreme Court. So that's meaningfully different than compliance issues at the district court level for sure. Like that's a very big difference.
Okay. Do you think, is there any foreign policy thing you care about that much? Like right now, Israel and Ukraine and Russia are all mad at us. I don't know how that's possible, but he managed to piss everybody off.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, foreign policy is weird for me because like my views are significantly more hawkish than either party, so it's hard for me like
significantly more hawkish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. How does Trump not drive you fucking insane then? Because I feel like a fucking neocon right now in terms of my foreign policy view.
I think our views on foreign policy are, from what I know of you, like roughly similar. So I think that's like the thing that happened. The thing that seems to be happening right now is that we're vacillating on a foreign policy level between being too predictable and being too unpredictable. And when we're
I
too
feel like
predictable,
we're super predictable. What have we ever been unpredictable on?
well, I think Trump is unpredictable, but not in a way that's necessarily helpful.
Well, I feel like he's
And
super predictable.
then-
Trump will always try to recede from the world stage with the United States. and Trump will never intervene in an issue where there's not like a clear-cut way for the U.S. to extract maximum value, and it's a surefire thing. That seems to I feel like I can predict what has Trump done that's like unpredictable?
I think that what Trump does, did you see him on Joe Rogan when he was talking about Bolton?
No, I could only watch 45 minutes of him stumbling through the conversation before I had to turn it off.
It was an interesting moment. He was talking about how much he hates Bolton, and then he said, like, but everyone knows that guy's crazy. And one nice thing about having him is that if I was talking to a foreign leader and I said, if you do this, we're going to bomb you, and they'd be like, you're not serious about bombing me. And then they look over my shoulder and see that guy, and they go, oh, yeah, he might do it. Like, I think that there's...
Yeah, when he says that, I think that's a lie. I think he's always lying when he says that. Because there's no foreign policy stuff you can point to where Trump was ever acting like that.
I think one thing that is useful about a Trumpian personality, I don't think he does it the way that should be done, but that it makes calculations fuzzy.
For who?
Why did... For everyone. Like, I think, like, why did Russia invade Crimea? Why did Russia then invade the Ukraine again? They calculated that they probably could get away with it.
Yeah, but
they were right.
But they continue to get away with it under Trump during his 4 years in office, and they're continuing to get away with it right now.
That's what I mean. I think that.
But there's nothing fuzzy there. Like when people say fuzzy, you make it sound like he could go either way. But
Biden or Obama were harder to predict.
Who?
Then if Biden or Obama were harder to predict on a foreign policy level, if they were a little fuzzier, those invasions might not have happened.
I think totally disagree. I think there's no basis for reality that is the case. But
no, you don't think so?
Absolutely not.
You don't think like Obama's red line or the Afghan withdrawal had anything to do with, Russia calculating that America's not going to like escalate a military response in the situation?
I think Obama's red line was stupid, but realistically, I'm not sure if I don't know what America could have done to escalate in 2014 for Crimea other than like making weapons available to Ukraine. But like Obama had a clear stance on fuck Russia, but Trump seems to have a clear stance on capitulate to Russia. Every single decision Trump has made has been total and utter capitulation to Russian interests every single time. So I don't know what's fuzzy or unclear there. Like, can you think of is there a single time where that hasn't been the case?
Well, I'm saying that Trump is not doing what I wanted him to do on foreign policy. So
I'm not saying that. I'm saying you keep using the word fuzzy, but it's always in one direction. That's not fuzzy to me. It seems like he's very predictable. He's always going to capitulate to Russian interests.
I think that Trump, it is when you're calculating how Trump is going to respond to something, it is less clear that he's going to engage in a proportional response.
When has he ever not?
I think that's the nature of his personality. That's the whole point of the chaos. And maybe you're saying that you think that people see through this, but the whole point of the chaotic negotiating style is that it's harder for people to get a read on what you're actually doing.
Again, we keep using these words chaotic and fuzzy and everything. It's not. It's complete and total capitulation to Russia at every single stage. There's nothing chaotic. It appears chaotic because the United States isn't seen as a country that ordinarily capitulates to Russia and abandons its place in the world order. That's the chaotic part. But Trump's decisions aren't chaotic. It's always moving in one direction.
Well, like, for example, like when he says, I'm going to build like Gaza Lago or whatever, whatever the
nobody thinks he's going to do that. He's retarded. Just like when he said he was going to take over oil wells in Syria. Nobody thought he was going to do that.
No, but I think there is like a thought that like, oh, well, if we don't return hostages or more likely the bodies of the hostages, then like Trump may actually really ramp up what Israel is going to be allowed to do or what arms the U.S. is going to supply to have Israel do.
We literally did that, and it didn't happen. Like 3 weeks ago, Trump was like, all the bodies need to be back in.
If that's like currently happening, yeah.
It's what?
Well, I mean, it's in progress right now. Like
but he said it had to be by like noon on Saturday, and this date has passed like 2 weeks and nothing happened.
Of course he did. Yeah, but I mean, whether or not you agree that like Trump's fuzziness has any benefits,
stop! You keep calling it fuzziness. I'm saying that it's not fuzziness; it's utter and total capitulation to Russian interest, and I can't think of a single example where that hasn't been the case. It's not fuzzy.
Well, I mean, I'm not. This is not an area where I'm super strong. So, but maybe
that's fine, sure, and you don't have to be. But you have the impression.
Didn't he have sanctions on Russia during his first term that were like fairly significant?
In his first term that were fairly... If he did, it was just probably a continuation of the last sanctions, no? I don't know if he did new ones or not. But I'm thinking like when we say like for instance, Trump's not going to... Trump's
I
not
don't.
gonna,
I don't want to like put short weight on that branch because I'm not sure that I can cite them with like enough familiarity. I
yeah,
thought
sure,
he
that's
did,
fine.
But
I'm thinking like when we
people
think
in the
like
comments
Trump
were
for
like,
sure won't be proportional in response. I mean, when Syria engaged in chemical weapons attacks, he did do a proportional strike. He's like, and he even gave him a warning ahead of time, which is standard practice.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm going to bomb your airport. We'll wipe people out." Assad moved his people out, and we bombed the airport. Or when we killed Soleimani, Iran said, "We're going to return fire." They returned fire. I don't know if we did a proportional counterattack or not, but it was all proportional. Like all of it is like business as usual. And then for Afghanistan, for the Taliban, it was a complete and utter capitulation to the Taliban. It was a total surrender. And then when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, it's a total, sorry.
The thing I said earlier, which I think we agree on, is that like if you say as a campaign promise that you are going to get peace more or less instantly upon taking office,
sure,
the only way to do that is to force Ukraine into concessions. Like there's no it's not like there's some negotiating position that could get Russia magically to concede instantly to withdraw from the territory.
There are definitely ways we could make it harder for them, right? If the U.S. would have said it would be unhinged, but imagine if Trump said no fly zone over Ukraine. Good luck. Like,
yeah,
but he won't do that because that would be bad against Russia.
No, but I mean, like when I say I'm significantly more hawkish, like that was something I wanted the U.S. to do instantly. Like when the initial invasion happened, I was like,
sure, I understand.
I was pro no fly.
Can you repeat back to me why I have issue with the word fuzzy, or do you understand what my issue is with that?
I think we're talking about different things, which is why we keep going back and forth. I'm talking about negotiating style, and you're talking about policy outcomes, which is why it's different.
No, it could be either one. Do you understand what my issue is with using the word fuzzy?
Maybe not. Go ahead.
My issue with fuzzy is it implies chaos. Also implies this, that there's a randomness on what Trump will do that makes him hard to predict, that makes it so you have to operate more carefully. But what I'm saying is it's not fuzzy and it's not random. It's always coming down on one side, right? Like if you had a parent and they had two children and they always beat one child and they never beat the other, you wouldn't say, well, their parenting style is fuzzy. You say, no, they always come down on one kid and they never come down on the other kid. That's not fuzzy or chaotic.
I mean, do you view like the struggle in Israel and the struggle in Ukraine as like fundamentally linked, or no?
No.
No? Okay.
I do think Trump has the same approach to both of them, though. I think in Israel, he sees Israel as the more powerful party that's easy to support, high with voters. He does that. In Russia, Ukraine, to negotiate on behalf of Ukraine would require actual leadership and actual bravery and actual like U.S. power. So it's easy to side with Putin. He's obviously the stronger position is going to win there. So he just wants to get out of that as quickly as possible and not lose any political capital there.
Yeah. To me, I look at those as like one of the questions involved in both is like, to what extent should the U.S. be projecting power abroad? And because that's something I generally favor, that certainly skews the way I view those. So they are more, they seem linked to me. So when you say like he never has the same outcome, I might interpret what he's doing in Israel differently than you do. But like you might be right. I don't know what's in his heart of hearts, certainly. But when I think about like, why is it valuable for the U.S. to support Israel, it has a lot to do with the U.S. projecting power and Western values abroad. That's part of the reason why we have been allied with Israel historically.
Sure, we can say that, but if that's the case, supporting Ukraine is way more important than supporting Israel, no? Like if we stopped supporting Israel completely, then I don't know if Israel probably would make it at this point. But like, who hates us at that point? I guess Israel hates us, and maybe some Jews around the world hate us. But whatever. If we stop supporting Ukraine, which is what we're doing, now all of Europe is talking about turning away from the United States.
Yeah. But you have 2 points. I certainly view the way he treats Israel and the way he treats the Ukraine as fundamentally different, whereas you view them as fundamentally the same because we're interpreting things differently. Like you interpret it as him just backing the stronger party, whereas I'm looking at it like, are we projecting U.S. influence abroad? He seems to want to in this one area, but not in the other.
Well, then we're viewing it the same because you're also viewing it differently, and I'm viewing it differently, right? He's doing two different actions between Israel and Ukraine, right?
Yeah, which that would seem fuzzy. That would be an example of he's not instantly easy to know what his foreign policy positions are. But whereas you would view it as being consistent, because it sounds like you're saying is, from your perspective, if I heard you right, you're saying.
Well, no, wait. So I understand what you're saying. You're saying it's fuzzy because it seems like he's got contrary motivations here. Or, But then I would say, well, then you should probably just assume that he's making. Yeah, but he's just making decisions differently than how you think. Then he's clearly not interested in projecting U.S. power. He's clearly interested in isolationism as a foreign policy thing, which also makes sense because of how he's dealing with Canada and Mexico, right?
except in Israel, oddly, which is, we can talk about why that might be.
Well, but Israel, that's
that
just
does
like
seem,
status quo. We just ship them some money and we don't have to, there's no political capital there, right?
Ukraine is certainly like, that's like the definition of status quo. Like, you want to talk about like,
Well,
protecting,
when I say status
protecting
quo,
Europe from Russia, that's what it was for.
Yeah, but when I say status quo, I just mean that like it's an easy like W. Like Israel's never falling to Hamas as much as the Israelis might say it's a legitimate threat. They're not. That's not happening. But Ukraine is obviously a very real threat and is on the way to falling against Russia, basically.
Yeah, and I think that like some of the stuff that he's been doing is like, I think you can only justify it by him just trying to get a win. Like he wants there to be peace, and he doesn't care the terms. Like withdrawing military data.
Sure.
That's like, it is very difficult for me to come up with any rationale for that other than you want to say that you brought peace to the region and you'd like that to be as fast as possible.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah,
because,
yeah, that's what I mean. He just wants the political win and then no political capital expended trying to do complicated shit. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so, and that is not how I would approach that issue at all. So, but I mean, I mean, again, it's weird talking about this issue because it's just an area where I totally disagree with his administration.
Sure. Are you okay with like, I know that you don't like bureaucracy, so are you okay with like all the deregulation of the crypto stuff and calling the SEC off of crypto scammers and stuff?
Crypto's that's a weird sector. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at it. Can you give me like the basic like factual rundown? I'll also assume you're right because I don't think I'm well informed enough to.
So cryptocurrency was for a long time kind of like an unregulated thing. So you kind of do whatever stuff that might traditionally be considered market manipulation or that the SEC might get you in trouble with. But obviously the SEC has been coming down harder on it for people that are engaged in like blatant scamming and everything else. And it seems like the Trump admin is now pulling a lot of that back where there were a couple people where the SEC is no longer investigating those people anymore. And they publicly declare that that's not going to happen. And it just seems weird, especially in combination with the fact that like Trump has his own huge like scam cryptocurrency that is just unhinged.
Well, so this is like in terms of what I was talking about earlier about like the shape of the executive branch. Like you think about like, what are the things that the executive branch should be doing, right? And like interstate commerce is one of those areas. Like and cryptocurrency is like true interstate commerce. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you're located. Like that's the kind of thing where you probably do need a centralized federal authority because the states are incapable of managing it on their own. There's no way a state could regulate cryptocurrency. I do think that the meme coins are like, when people ask, they're like, how are the Clintons so rich? How are the Obamas so rich? And it's because they give speeches at hedge funds and they get like, $50,000 for a 50-minute speech, because in their post-election years. I feel like if you're a populist, you're probably not getting invited to the hedge funds. The like meme coins are like the populist version of the hedge fund speech, where you're just taking money from your base. Because didn't Mullally in Argentina have one too? Where it's just like okay, I'm a populist and now I'm just gonna get super rich and I'm just gonna basically steal money from my base, and that's the move.
Sure, maybe, yeah. That's quite the way to phrase a super huge scam thing, especially when these guys are all already like billionaires and probably don't need the money, but
I mean, I think it's a clear con. Like I think it's gross. It seems like just you profiting off of your political positions, which people have been doing it in different ways for a very long time. This is a new way, but it seems particularly gross because you're taking money from people who, generally speaking, can't afford it instead of people who, generally speaking, can. But if you're a populist, you're kind of attacking the people who would be giving you the speech money. So they're probably not paying you for it. Maybe Elon would. I don't know.
Sure. Well, except now Trump seems to be trying to deregulate as many of those people as possible, so they would have a favorable view of them, but yeah, okay.
Well, that's one of the questions. Like, is he a real populist or a faux populist?
Who?
Trump.
I would say he's a real populist. Populists always suck. Well, it feels like the path to populism is always going to be the system is broken, it's irrevocably damaged and harmed, and I'm going to tear it all down and fix everything for you. And then a populist gets into office, and they're like, oh shit, a lot of these systems probably exist for a good reason, and this is way more complicated than I thought, and I'm not going to do anything like effective. And then you just basically pat her out, yeah.
So then how do we get out of a populist era might be a question worth asking, because I do certainly think the Republicans have a huge advantage in a populist contest. They seem to be much better positioned.
I mean, I think people
navigate
probably
that kind
have to
of-
suffer real harm related to populist policies. So if it is the case that like the VA starts losing employees and stuff gets worse significantly, or prices go up because of tariffs, then I think like that type of stuff. And the economic harm is the one that's the most feelable to Americans. And then that would make people change course. But we'll have to see if that happens, I guess.
Yeah, it's tricky because one of the things that, when people talk about the need to like trim down the federal government, the need to trim down the deficit, it's a lot of it is about the inflationary pressure. Where it's just like if the government is spending this amount of money and doing this amount of work and taking on debt to do this, regardless of what they tax you, it's going to end up hugely negative to the economy in the long run. It's tough though, because that kind of like nebulous harm is very hard to explain to the voter base in a way that captures their attention.
Yeah.
The Doge stuff, I think, it seems to work better. Like they're like, oh my God, we found 37,000 Windows licenses for 5 employees. Like that seems to get more attention than the kind of like the big picture. Like if the government's spending money it doesn't have, that steals the wealth of your children, which is, I think, the more compelling story, but not the one that seems to get attention the way that the trans opera does.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Any other topics or issues you want to go over?
No, man, good. It was good to talk to you again. Just because I just know I'm gonna hear about this after I get off this. The last time we talked, I got bombarded by like the craziest people in the internet, as you can imagine, which is probably old hat to you, very new for me. And one of the, in part, I was like, fair enough. Like, I have daughters. Like, we don't need to get into it, but the stuff you were accused of is not like, it's stuff that makes me angry.
Sure.
But also, I almost wonder, like, do these people not know what I do for a living? Like,
what do you mean by that?
I got a guy off death row.
Oh.
He was convicted of murder, and I got him off death row because I believed he was innocent. Like, the idea that, like, in my line of work, that I'm uncomfortable speaking with people who are accused of things is kind of crazy. Like, this is, like, in a very real sense, what I do for a living. And anyway, I was struck by how crazy the internet can be, where people are like, aren't you going to rush to judgment on this issue? And it's like, that seems very counter to the norms I espouse and the life I lead and the work I do. So no, I probably won't. But anyway, that's how the internet is, I guess.
Yep. It's a lot of unhinged people. It's just how it goes. Yeah. Yeah.
And well, good talking to you again. If you ever want to yell about some legal thing, give me a shout.
Yeah, sure. If anything ever comes up, my audience will always be unhinged, and they will be about this conversation. And I'm a little unhinged about this conversation, but I do appreciate the conversation. I appreciate it. So, yeah. Have a good one.
Yeah, good to talk to you. Look forward to meeting your unhinged followers.
Yeah, have a good one, man.
Bye.
Whew. What is this?